There were 20 minutes left on my final shift before retirement when the radio crackled with a code blue. The address was a penthouse in the Gold Coast district, the kind of building where the air smells like money and the doormen wear suits that cost more than my car. I sighed, adjusted my uniform, and went there to save a life. I did not know I was walking into my own past. Inside that apartment, surrounded by marble and cold glass, I was treating a patient when my eyes locked onto a massive oil painting hanging above the fireplace. I froze. The man in the painting was young, black, muscular, and wearing a tattered, mud-stained wedding dress. It was a humiliating image, a cruel joke of art. But I knew every brushstroke because I was the man in that dress. And just as the shock hit me, a young white man in a silk robe stepped forward, kicked my medical bag aside, and sneered. "Don't look at it with your dirty eyes, old man. That painting is worth $20 million. It is called The Clown in a Dress." He did not know he was talking to the clown. He did not know that the clown was about to destroy his entire world. Before I continue this story, let me know which city you are listening from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that dignity has no price tag. My name is Cornelius Banks, and at 70 years old, I have seen everything the city of Chicago can throw at a man. I have pulled children from burning buildings and performed CPR in alleyways where the rats were the only witnesses. I thought I was unshakable. I thought I had grown a layer of skin so thick that no insult could penetrate it. I was wrong. That night, the wind was whipping off Lake Michigan, cutting through the thermal layers of my EMT uniform like invisible knives. My partner, a young kid named Rodriguez who still had hope in his eyes, was driving the ambulance. We were tired. It had been a 12-hour shift full of false alarms and overdoses, but when the call came in for the penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, we sat up straighter. Rich people do not call 911 unless they are truly dying or truly delusional. When we pulled up to the glass entrance of the Sapphire Tower, the revolving doors were already spinning. I grabbed the trauma bag and rushed toward the lobby, my boots heavy on the polished granite. But before I could even reach the elevator bank, a large hand pressed against my chest. It was the head of security, a man whose neck was wider than my head, looking at me with that familiar mix of suspicion and disdain that I have dealt with since 1968. He did not see a paramedic. He did not see the badge on my chest or the defibrillator in my hand. He saw a 70-year-old black man in a hurry, and in his mind that meant trouble. "Service entrances around the back," he barked, not even blinking. I looked at him, feeling the precious seconds ticking away in my head. A cardiac arrest patient has roughly 4 minutes before brain damage starts. We were already at minute 2. "I am not delivering a pizza," I said, my voice low and steady, the kind of voice I used to calm panic victims. "I am here for a code blue in penthouse A. Open the elevator." The guard crossed his arms. "I don't care who you are. Residents don't like seeing crew in the main lobby. Policy is policy. Go around back." Rodriguez tried to intervene, shouting that someone was dying upstairs, but the guard just tapped his earpiece, looking through us as if we were invisible. This is the reality of my life. Even with a uniform that says I am here to save you, I am still required to use the back door. I didn't have time to argue about civil rights. I didn't have time to teach him a lesson about humanity. I stepped forward, practically nose to nose with him, and let the anger I usually keep locked in the basement of my soul leak out just a little bit. "If the man upstairs dies because you are worried about the lobby aesthetics, I will personally make sure his family sues you, this building, and the security company for every dime you have. I will testify that you blocked medical aid. Do you want to be the reason a billionaire dies tonight?" The guard's eyes flickered. Doubt crept in. He grunted, swiped his key card, and the golden doors of the elevator slid open. We stepped in, leaving him glaring at our backs. The elevator shot up 50 floors in seconds, popping my ears, but my heart was still down in the lobby, beating with the slow-burning rhythm of indignation. I told myself to let it go. Focus on the patient. Focus on the job. The doors opened directly into the apartment. It was not a home. It was a museum of cold surfaces. White marble floors, glass walls overlooking the city lights, and furniture that looked too uncomfortable to sit on. In the center of the room, lying on a white fur rug, was an elderly man gasping for air, clutching his chest. But he wasn't the first thing I noticed. The first thing I noticed was the young man standing over him. He was tall, with slicked-back blonde hair and wearing a silk dressing gown that probably cost more than my annual pension. He held a glass of amber liquid in one hand and a phone in the other. He wasn't performing CPR. He wasn't comforting his father. He was shouting into the phone about a stock trade. When he saw us, he didn't point to the patient. He pointed to my boots. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice shrill and piercing. "Are those boots clean? I just had this carpet imported from Milan." I ignored him. I dropped to my knees beside the patient. No pulse. Shallow, agonal breathing. I ripped open the man's silk pajama top and positioned my hands on his sternum. "Start compressions," I ordered Rodriguez. The young man, who I would later learn was Hunter Caldwell, finally hung up the phone and looked down at us with a sneer of absolute disgust. "You are making a mess," Hunter spat out, taking a sip of his drink. "Can't you move him to the tile? That fur is white fox. Blood doesn't come out of white fox." I looked up at him, my hands rhythmically pumping his father's chest, keeping the blood flowing to a brain that was starving for oxygen. "Sir, your father is in cardiac arrest. Step back and let us work." Hunter rolled his eyes. "He is always in cardiac arrest. He does this for attention. Just give him the shock thing and get him out of here. I have guests coming in an hour. I have seen bad families. I have seen drug addicts steal from their overdosing mothers. I have seen husbands beat their wives while we were stitching them up. But this was a different kind of evil. This was the evil of indifference." This man looked at his dying father and saw an inconvenience. He looked at me and saw a janitor. We worked for 10 minutes. Sweat was dripping down my forehead, stinging my eyes. We pushed epinephrine. We shocked him twice. Finally, a rhythm appeared on the monitor. A weak, thready pulse, but it was there. We had him back. Rodriguez began prepping the stretcher for transport. I stood up, wiping my hands on my pants, my knees cracking from the hard floor. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my adrenaline. That was when I looked up. Directly above the fireplace, dominating the entire living room, was the painting. It was massive, at least 10 feet tall. The style was hyper-realistic, every detail captured with brutal clarity. The background was a stormy gray sky, oppressive and heavy. In the foreground stood a figure. It was a black man, young, maybe 20 years old. His muscles were taut veins popping in his neck and arms as if he were carrying the weight of the world. But he wasn't wearing work clothes. He was wearing a wedding dress. The dress in the painting was white lace, delicate and feminine, but it was torn at the hem, stained with mud and grease. The man in the painting looked trapped in it. His face was twisted in a mixture of agony and defiance, staring straight out of the canvas with eyes that held 1,000 years of sorrow. I stopped breathing. The sounds of the medical equipment faded away. The room spun. I knew that dress. I knew the itch of that lace against my skin. I knew the smell of the studio where it was painted, the smell of turpentine and stale cigarette smoke. It was 1974. I was a broke student trying to pay for my mother's insulin. A crazy artist had offered me $50 to pose for a project he called The Burden of Masculinity. I had agreed because $50 was a fortune to me then. I had put on the dress, humiliated, angry, desperate, and he had captured every ounce of that shame on canvas. I had walked out of that studio with my $50 and never looked back. I thought the painting had been thrown away or lost in a basement. I had erased it from my memory. And now, 50 years later, here it was, looming over me, a monument to my lowest moment, hanging in a shrine of wealth. I took an involuntary step forward, my hand reaching out as if to touch the canvas to see if the paint was still wet. "Hey!" Hunter's voice snapped like a whip. He stepped between me and the fireplace, blocking my view. He looked me up and down, his lip curling in amusement. "You like art, old man? You have an eye for the expensive stuff." I couldn't speak. My throat was dry as dust. That painting," I stammered. Hunter laughed. A cold, hollow sound. "It is magnificent, isn't it? I just bought it from a private collection in Zurich. Cost me 20 million. It is the centerpiece of my collection." He turned to look at the painting, sipping his drink, acting like he owned the soul of the man in the canvas. "It is called The Clown in a Dress. Look at him. Look at the pathetic look in his eyes. The artist captured the perfect essence of weakness. A big, strong brute forced to wear a woman's dress. It is hilarious. It reminds me that strength is nothing without status. The clown in a dress. The words hit me harder than any physical blow. That was not the name the artist had given it. The artist had called it the Atlas of the Slums. Hunter had renamed it. He had taken my pain, my sacrifice, my desperate attempt to save my mother, and he had turned it into a joke, a $20 million punchline. He turned back to me, his eyes dead and shark-like. But don't you worry about art, old man. You stick to wiping up vomit and driving the ambulance. People like you aren't meant to understand masterpieces. You are just here to clean up the mess. Now get my father out of here. He is ruining the vibe. I looked at Hunter. I looked at his arrogant jawline, his manicured hands, his utter lack of humanity. He thought he was superior. He thought he was the master of the universe because he could buy a painting for the price of a hospital wing. He didn't know that the man in the dress was standing right in front of him. He didn't know that the muscles in the painting were the same muscles that had just pumped life back into his father's heart. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the canvas off the wall and smash it over his head. I wanted to shout, "That is me, that is my face, that is my shame, you are drinking scotch too." But I didn't. I am 70 years old. I know that anger without a plan is just noise. And looking at Hunter Caldwell, I knew that noise wouldn't hurt him. He was insulated by money and lawyers. To hurt a man like this, you don't use your fists, you don't use your voice, you use the one thing he worships against him. You use the truth. I swallowed my rage. I let it settle in my stomach, hot and heavy, fueling a fire that had been dormant for decades. I adjusted my uniform. I looked him dead in the eye, and for a split second I let him see the same defiance that was in the painting. "I will get him out," I said quietly. "And sir, be careful with that painting. Sometimes the things we hang on our walls have a way of coming down on our heads." Hunter just snorted and turned away to pour another drink. He didn't see the threat. He didn't see the storm gathering. He just saw an old black man leaving his penthouse. As we rolled the stretcher out, I took one last look at my younger self hanging on the wall. The eyes in the painting seemed to follow me. They were pleading. "Do something," they said. "Don't let us be a joke." I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on the gilded cage. My shift was over, but my work was just beginning. Hunter Caldwell had just made the biggest mistake of his privileged life. He had invited the clown into his circus, and he had no idea that the clown was about to burn the tent down. The VIP wing of Northwestern Memorial Hospital was not a place for sickness. It was a place for inconvenience management. The floors were carpeted in plush navy wool that muffled the sound of gurneys. The walls were adorned with abstract art that cost more than my entire year of salary as an EMT. I stood in the corner of the private suite, holding the transfer paperwork, feeling the sweat dry cold on my back under my uniform. Hunter Caldwell was sitting up in the bed, already demanding a sparkling water and complaining that the blood pressure cuff was scratching his arm. He looked vibrant for a man who had technically died 40 minutes ago. Money has a way of resuscitating people faster than epinephrine. Then the door flew open. The sound of heels clicking frantically against the threshold broke the sterile silence. It was Zoe. My Zoe. But she did not look like the girl I had raised in our two-bedroom walk-up on the south side. She looked like she belonged here in this world of hushed voices and high thread counts. She was wearing a cream-colored trench coat that looked like it would stain if you even breathed on it wrong, and her hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek bun. Her eyes were wide with panic, but they were not looking for me. They scanned the room and locked instantly onto the white man in the bed. "Hunter," she gasped, rushing to his side. She dropped her designer bag on the floor and grabbed his hand. "I heard the doorman say you collapsed. My God, are you okay?" Hunter pulled his hand away slightly, a gesture so small that anyone else might have missed it, but I saw it. He did not like her desperation. It was too messy for him. "I am fine, Zoe," he said, his voice raspy but annoyed. "It was just a little reaction. Don't make a scene." Zoe froze, correcting her posture instantly. She smoothed her coat and lowered her voice. "I was just worried." I stood there 10 feet away, holding a clipboard, waiting. I was waiting for her to sense me. I was waiting for that telepathic connection that fathers and daughters are supposed to have. I was the man who had carried her on my shoulders when she was tired. I was the man who had worked double shifts to pay for her violin lessons, even though I knew we couldn't afford the instrument. Surely she would feel my presence. She turned to pick up her bag. Her eyes swept across the room. They landed on the nurse. They landed on my partner, Rodriguez. And then finally they landed on me. For a second, I saw her face soften. I saw the little girl named Zoe. Her mouth opened slightly. Dad! The word formed on her lips, but no sound came out. Then she looked at Hunter. She looked at the expensive room. She looked at my dirty boots and my wrinkled uniform. And I watched in real time as a steel shutter slammed down behind her eyes. The softness vanished. She straightened her spine. She did not smile. She did not rush over to hug me. Instead, she offered me a tight, polite nod. The kind of nod you give to a doorman who opens a taxi for you. "Thank you for bringing him in," she said stiffly. That was it. "Thank you for bringing him in." Not "Hello, Dad." Not "How are you, Dad." I was a service provider. I was the delivery man who had dropped off her package. I felt a cracking sensation in my chest, painful and sharp. It hurt worse than the time a beam fell on my ribs during the fire of '92. "Hello, Zoe," I said, keeping my voice level. "He is stable. We just need to sign off on the transfer." Hunter groaned from the bed. "Can you make them hurry up, Zoe? The old guy smells like diesel fuel and rubbing alcohol. It is giving me a headache." I looked at my daughter. I waited for her to defend me. I waited for her to say, "He smells like that because he just saved your life, Hunter. He smells like hard work." Zoe didn't look at me. She looked at her shoes. "I am sorry, Hunter," she whispered. "They will be gone in a minute." She apologized. She apologized for my existence. She apologized for the smell of the labor that had paid for her college tuition. At that moment, I realized that the daughter I loved hadn't just drifted away. She had been rewritten, and the author of this new cold draft was the man lying in the bed. Before I could sign the papers and leave, the door opened again. A man in a white coat walked in, followed by two residents. It was Dr. Sterling, the chief of cardiology. I knew him by reputation. He was the kind of doctor who only touched patients who had their names on buildings. Mr. Caldwell. Dr. Sterling boomed, putting on a dazzling smile. "You gave us quite a scare, but your EKG looks excellent. Just a minor arrhythmia triggered by stress and perhaps some chemical interaction." Hunter waved his hand dismissively. "Just get me out of here, Sterling. I have a wedding to prepare for." Dr. Sterling laughed, a practiced, oily sound. "Of course. We can't have the groom missing his own party." Then Dr. Sterling turned to the rest of the room. He nodded at Zoe. "Lovely to see you again, Ms. Banks." And then he looked at me. He paused. He saw a black man with gray hair standing near the family, not wearing a standard hospital uniform. He looked from me to Zoe, and for a moment he made the logical connection. "Oh, pardon me," Dr. Sterling said, extending a hand toward me. "I assume this is the father of the bride. It is good that you were here to ride with him. It is always better when family accompanies the patient." The room went dead silent. The air was suddenly sucked out of the suite. I looked at Dr. Sterling's hand. I started to reach for it. I was going to shake it. I was going to say, "Yes, I am Cornelius Banks. I am her father." "No." Hunter's voice cut through the air like a gunshot. Dr. Sterling stopped. He looked confused. Hunter sat up, adjusting his silk robe. He laughed a short, cruel bark. "Good God, no." "Sterling, do you think I would let my father-in-law ride in the back of a filthy ambulance? That is just the help." I froze. My hand was still half extended. Dr. Sterling pulled his hand back as if he had almost touched a hot stove. "Oh, I see. My apologies." Hunter continued, enjoying the moment. He leaned back against the pillows, staring right at me with a smirk that dared me to speak. He is an old family retainer. He used to do yard work for Zoe's grandmother back in the day. When the ambulance showed up and I saw it was him, I figured it was a funny coincidence. He is practically a servant. Isn't that right, Zoe? I turned my head slowly toward my daughter. This was the test. This was the moment where the soul is measured. All she had to do was speak. All she had to do was say, "No, that is my father." Zoe's face was pale. She gripped the strap of her purse so hard her knuckles were white. She looked at Hunter and I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of violence, but fear of his disapproval. Fear of losing access to this golden world. She looked at Dr. Sterling, who was waiting for clarification. Then she looked at the floor. "Yes," she whispered. "He has worked for the family for a long time." My heart didn't break. It evaporated. It turned into ash and settled in the pit of my stomach. My own daughter had just disowned me in front of strangers to protect the ego of a man who treated her like an accessory. She had reduced my life, my career, and my fatherhood to yard work. Dr. Sterling cleared his throat, clearly eager to move on from the awkwardness. "Very well. Nurse, get the transfer papers for the driver to sign so he can leave. We need to discuss Mr. Caldwell's medication. I signed the papers. My hand did not shake. I signed my name, Cornelius Banks, with heavy, deliberate strokes. I tore the carbon copy off the bottom and handed the clipboard to the nurse. I did not look at Dr. Sterling. I did not look at Zoe. I turned my back on them. "Wait!" Hunter called out. I stopped at the door. I shouldn't have turned around, but the image of that painting, the clown in a dress, was burning a hole in my mind. I needed to know. I needed to confirm that the nightmare I saw on his wall was real. I turned. Hunter was smiling, but his eyes were cold. "You did a good job today, old-timer," he said. "The ride was bumpy, but you got me here." I looked at him. I looked past him to Zoe, who was staring out the window, refusing to witness this. "I saw the painting, Hunter," I said. My voice was low, deep, and filled with the vibration of a coming storm. "The one over your fireplace." Hunter's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed. "I told you not to look at that," he said. "It is me," I said. I stepped forward, ignoring the nurse who was trying to usher me out. "That is my face. That is my body. I posed for that painting in 1974. The room went quiet again. Even Dr. Sterling looked up from his chart. Hunter stared at me for a long second, then he started to chuckle. It started as a low rumble and grew into a laugh. "You," he asked, "you are the clown in the dress." He looked me up and down, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "Well, I suppose I see the resemblance. The misery is certainly the same." "Where did you get it?" I asked. "That painting was never meant to be sold. It was a study. I never signed a release." Hunter sighed. He reached for the wallet on the bedside table. He pulled out a thick clip of cash. He peeled off 5 $100 bills. He held them out toward me, dangling them like you would dangle a fish in front of a cat. "Listen to me very carefully, old man," Hunter said, his voice dropping to a whisper that only we could hear. "I don't care if you posed for it. I don't care if you painted it with your own blood. I bought it. I own it. It is my property. And you are just the canvas. The canvas does not get an opinion. The canvas does not get royalties." He tossed the bills. They fluttered through the air and landed on the floor at my feet. "There is $500, Hunter said. "Go buy yourself a new uniform. You look pathetic. And if you ever mention that painting again, I will have your pension revoked before the sun goes down. Do you understand how small you are?" I looked at the money on the floor. It was green, crisp, and filthy. I looked at Zoe. She finally turned from the window. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. "Dad, please," she hissed. Her voice was trembling. "Don't make a scene. Just take the money and go. You are embarrassing us." Us. She was part of the us now. I was the them. I did not bend down. I did not pick up the money. I stepped over the bills as if they were dog excrement on the sidewalk. I looked at Hunter one last time. "Keep your money," I said. "You are going to need it." I walked out of the room. The heavy door clicked shut behind me, sealing them in their tower of glass and lies. I walked down the long, silent corridor of the VIP wing. I didn't feel sad anymore. The sadness had been left back in that room on the floor with the money. What I felt now was clarity. Cold, hard clarity. Hunter thought he had bought a painting. He thought he had bought my silence. He thought he had bought my daughter. He was wrong. He had just bought himself a war. I took the elevator down to the ground floor. This time I didn't go out the back service entrance. I walked straight through the main lobby. The head of security started to step forward to stop me, to tell me I was breaking protocol again. But he saw my face. He saw the look in my eyes, and he stepped back. I walked out the revolving doors into the cold Chicago night. The wind hit me, but I didn't shiver. I took out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years, a number for a man who used to be the most dangerous lawyer in the city before they took his license. "Hello, Levi," I said when the voice on the other end answered. "Cornelius," the voice rasped. "It has been a lifetime. Are you in trouble?" "No," I said, looking up at the penthouse lights piercing the dark sky. "But someone else is about to be. I need you to find everything you can on a painting called The Clown in a Dress. We are going to work. Before I continue, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been betrayed by your own child to please a partner? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button. It helps more people hear the truth." 2 weeks later, I received an invitation. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossed lettering. A dinner in my honor, it said, a gesture of gratitude for saving Hunter's father. I knew it was a lie before I even opened the envelope. Men like Hunter Caldwell do not host dinners for ambulance drivers unless they want something. But I went. I went because I needed to look the enemy in the eye one more time. I needed to see if my daughter was still in there somewhere, buried under the layers of designer silk and fear. The venue was the Gilded Cage, a private dining club on the 45th floor of a skyscraper that looked down on the city like a god judging insects. The room was dimly lit by crystal chandeliers, and the table was set with enough silverware to perform a major surgery. There were 12 people seated, Hunter, Zoe, and 10 of their friends. They were all young, beautiful, and terrifyingly rich. They looked like a pack of wolves that had just been groomed at a salon. I was the only black face at the table. I was the only person wearing a suit bought off the rack at a discount store 10 years ago. It was clean and pressed, but against their Italian wool and French lace, I looked like I was wearing a costume. "Sit here," Cornelius Hunter said, pointing to the chair at the far end of the table. "The seat of honor, or the seat of the accused." I sat down. The chair was velvet soft enough to swallow you whole. The waiter, a young man who looked terrified of Hunter, placed a napkin on my lap before I could touch it. "We are so glad you could make it," Hunter announced, raising his wineglass. His eyes were glittering with a malicious kind of joy. "We were just talking about the importance of legacy. Were we not, everyone?" The guests murmured in agreement, their eyes flicking over me like I was an exhibit in a zoo. Dinner was a minefield. The first course was some kind of raw fish topped with gold leaf. I looked at the array of forks to my left. There were 3 of them. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Just a fraction. But Hunter saw it. "Oh, be careful," Cornelius Hunter said loudly. His voice cut through the soft jazz music. "That is the salad fork. You want the small one on the outside for the crudo. We wouldn't want you to look uncultured in front of the senator's son, would we?" He nodded toward a young man across from me. The table erupted in polite, tinkling laughter. It was not a warm laugh. It was the sound of ice cracking. I put the fork down. I did not pick up the other one. I looked at Hunter. "I am not hungry," I said quietly. Zoe was sitting to my right. She was staring at her plate, cutting a piece of asparagus into tiny microscopic pieces. She did not look at me. She did not tell Hunter to stop. She was shrinking, making herself small, hoping that if she was quiet enough, the monster wouldn't turn his attention to her. "You should eat," Hunter smiled, showing all his teeth. "It costs $200 a plate. That is more than your weekly pension check, isn't it?" The guests laughed again, this time louder. They were feeding off his cruelty. It was their entertainment. I realized then that I was not a guest. I was the court jester. I was brought here to be humiliated so Hunter could show his friends how powerful he was. He could take a man, a father, a lifesaver, and reduce him to a joke about a fork. I took a sip of water. It tasted bitter. I decided to wait. I knew the real attack was coming. This was just the warm-up. When the main course was cleared away, Hunter stood up. He tapped his spoon against his glass. The room went silent. "I have a little surprise for everyone," Hunter announced. "As you know, I have recently acquired a masterpiece for my collection, a painting that speaks to the very soul of human patheticness." He reached under the table and pulled out a large framed print. It was a high-quality replica of the painting, The Clown in a Dress. He propped it up against the centerpiece so everyone could see. There were gasps of appreciation, then snickers. "Look at him," Hunter said, gesturing to the young man in the painting. "My face, my body, my shame." "I did some research on this piece," Hunter lied. His voice was smooth like oil on water. "The artist found this model in a prison ward. He was a convicted felon, a thief who stole from his own family to buy drugs. The artist forced him to wear the dress as a punishment, a symbol of how he had emasculated himself with his crimes." I gripped the edge of the table. My knuckles turned gray. It was a lie, a disgusting, vile lie. I had posed for that painting to buy insulin for my dying mother. I had worked 3 jobs that year. I had never stolen a dime in my life. "That is fascinating," one of the guests said, leaning in. "So the pain in his eyes is real guilt." "Exactly," Hunter beamed. "He is not a victim. He is a predator who got caught. And now he is immortalized as a joke. It is poetic justice, isn't it?" He looked directly at me. "Don't you agree, Cornelius? Do you think criminals deserve to be humiliated?" The room waited. Zoe stopped cutting her asparagus. She looked at me, her eyes begging me to stay silent, begging me to swallow the poison. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "That man was not a thief," I said. My voice was steady, but it carried the weight of 50 years of labor. That man was a son trying to save his mother, and that dress was not a punishment. It was a job. Something you know nothing about, Hunter. You have never worked a day in your life. You inherited your money, and you inherited your cruelty. The room gasped. Someone dropped a fork. Hunter did not look angry. He looked delighted. He had gotten a reaction. "Oh, listen to him," Hunter laughed, clapping his hands. "The help has an opinion on art history. How adorable. Sit down, Cornelius. You are ruining the mood." I did not sit down. But Hunter wasn't done. He waved his hand and the waiter stepped forward, placing a thick leather folder on the table in front of me. "We can discuss art later," Hunter said, his tone shifting from mockery to business. "The real reason I invited you here, Cornelius, is because Zoe and I are worried about you." He opened the folder. Inside were legal documents. I saw the words, power of attorney and property transfer. "You are getting old," Hunter said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "You are living in that rundown shack in the South Side. It is dangerous. It is dirty. It is no place for the father of my wife." He pushed a pen toward me. "We have found a wonderful facility for you. Sunrise Gardens. It is an assisted living home. Very clean. They have bingo on Tuesdays. All you have to do is sign over the deed to your house. We will sell it, use the money to pay for your first year at the home, and invest the rest for your future." I looked at the papers. I looked at the property address, my mother's house, the house I was born in, the house where I raised Zoe. It was in a neighborhood that was rapidly gentrifying. Developers were buying up lots for millions to build condos. "This isn't about my safety," I said. "This is about the land. You want to tear down my home to build a parking lot, don't you?" Zoe finally spoke. "Dad, please. It is a good offer. The house is falling apart. You can't maintain it." I looked at my daughter. "You grew up in that house, Zoe. Your height marks are still on the doorframe in the kitchen. Your mother died in the bedroom upstairs. And you want to sell it for a bingo night. It is just a house." "Dad," Zoe snapped. Her voice was brittle. "Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic? Hunter is trying to help you." "Help me," I repeated. I looked at Hunter. He was leaning back smug and satisfied. He thought he had won. He thought I was a desperate old man who would trade his legacy for a warm bed and a false sense of security. I picked up the pen. Hunter smiled. He thought I was going to sign. Instead, I used the pen to stab the steak on my untouched plate. I left it there sticking out of the meat like a dagger. "I would rather sleep under a bridge than live in a cage built by you," I said. I looked around the table at the 12 young, wealthy faces. "You call this a dinner," I said. "I call it a feeding frenzy. You are not people. You are vultures. You pick at the bones of those who built this city, and you laugh while you do it. But be careful. Vultures only eat the dead. And I am very much alive." I turned to Zoe. "I hope the champagne is worth it, daughter, because once you sell your soul, you can never buy it back, not even for $20 million. I turned and walked out. "Sit down," Hunter screamed. His mask slipped. His face turned red. "You don't walk away from me. I will ruin you. I will have the city condemn that house. I will have you on the street by winter." I kept walking. I walked through the heavy oak doors. I walked past the terrified waiter. I pressed the button for the elevator. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. Hunter Caldwell had made 3 mistakes tonight. He had mocked my past. He had threatened my home. And he had underestimated my intelligence. As the elevator descended, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had not just been sitting there listening, I had been recording the entire dinner, the mockery, the lie about the convict, the threat to condemn my house if I didn't sign. I had it all. I dialed Levi's number again. "Did you get the file?" I asked. "I got it," Levi answered, his voice crackling with excitement. "And Cornelius, I found something else. The artist didn't just leave a diary. He left a will. And guess who he named as the executor of his intellectual property if his estate ever mishandled his work?" "Who?" I asked. "You," Levi said. "The model. He wanted you to have the final say. Hunter doesn't own that painting. He owns stolen property." I smiled. For the first time that night, I smiled. Good, I said. Let's go to work. I walked out into the cool night air. The city lights didn't look like judgment anymore. They looked like spotlights waiting for the main act, and the main act was coming. The clown was about to take off his makeup and put on his war paint. Before I tell you what we found in the artist's will, I need to know. Have you ever had someone try to take what was yours and call it charity? How did you stop them? Tell me your story in the comments, and please hit that subscribe button. The war against Hunter Caldwell is just beginning. The next morning, the sky over Chicago was the color of a fresh bruise. I arrived at the ambulance depot at 6 o'clock sharp, just like I had for the past 15 years. My uniform was pressed, my boots were polished, I was ready to save lives. But when I swiped my ID card at the employee entrance, the light turned red. I swiped it again. Red. A sinking feeling settled in my gut, heavy and cold. It was the same feeling I used to get right before a building collapsed. I knocked on the glass. The security guard, a man I had shared coffee with for a decade, wouldn't look at me. He just pointed toward the administrative office. I walked into the office. My supervisor, Mike, was sitting at his desk. He was a good man, usually. He had a picture of his kids on the wall and a stress ball in his hand. Today, he was squeezing that ball so hard I thought it would pop. He didn't offer me a seat. "I am sorry," Cornelius, Mike said, staring at his keyboard. "We are letting you go, effective immediately." I stood there, feeling the air leave the room. "Letting me go," I repeated. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. "On what grounds, Mike?" "I have a perfect record. I have never been late. I have the highest patient survival rate in the district." Mike finally looked up. His eyes were red. He looked ashamed. "It is not about performance, Cornelius. You know that. It is restructuring. Budget cuts. We are downsizing the senior staff." I laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. "Don't lie to me, Mike," I said. "We are understaffed. You were begging me to work overtime last week. This isn't about the budget. Who made the call?" Mike looked away. He picked up a pen and started clicking it nervously. It came from the top, Cornelius, the board of directors. One of the major shareholders called the CEO personally this morning. He said you were a liability. He said you were unstable. He threatened to pull his funding if you were still on the payroll by noon. I knew it. I didn't even have to ask the name. Hunter Caldwell. He owned shares in half the city, including the private medical group that ran our ambulance service. He hadn't just insulted me. He had reached out his hand from his ivory tower and crushed my livelihood just because he could. He wanted to show me that my 30 years of service meant nothing compared to his 30 seconds of a phone call. I took my badge off my shirt. I placed it on the desk. It made a small, heavy clatter. "Tell the shareholder," I said, leaning in close so Mike could see the fire in my eyes, that he just made the biggest mistake of his life. "You can take my job, Mike, but you can't take my dignity, and you certainly can't take my history." I walked out of the depot. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye to the guys in the break room. I couldn't. If I had opened my mouth, I would have screamed. I got into my old sedan, the engine sputtering as I turned the key. I had no job. I had no pension security. I was 70 years old and unemployed in a city that eats the weak for breakfast. But I wasn't weak. I was angry. And anger is a fuel that burns cleaner than gasoline. I didn't go home. I went to the one place where truth still matters. The Harold Washington Library. It is a massive building, a fortress of knowledge in the center of the loop. I walked past the students and the homeless men sleeping in the chairs. I went straight to the arts and humanities section on the 8th floor. I needed to find the man who had painted me. I needed to find Elias Thorne. I spent hours there. The smell of old paper and dust filled my nose. My eyes strained against the small print. I pulled every book on Chicago art history from the 1970s. I searched digital archives. I felt like a detective looking for a ghost. And then I found it. It was a biography published 10 years ago titled The Burden of Atlas, the Art of Elias Thorne. I flipped through the pages, my heart hammering against my ribs. There were sketches of the city, portraits of politicians. And then on page 142, there I was. The painting, the clown in a dress. But under the photo, the caption didn't say clown. It read, Atlas of the Slums. Oil on Canvas, 1974. I read the text accompanying the image. It was an excerpt from Elias Thorne's personal journal, May 12, 1974. I met a young man today. His name is Cornelius. He He carries the weight of the world in his eyes. He is working 3 jobs to keep his mother alive. I asked him to wear the wedding dress not to mock him, but to show the absurdity of the roles we are forced to play. He is not a man in a dress. He is a warrior in a straitjacket. He is the strongest human being I have ever painted. I paid him $50, but I owe him my soul. Note to self, I must get the release form signed when he comes back next week. I froze. I read the last sentence again. I must get the release form signed when he comes back next week. I never went back. My mother had died 3 days later. I had moved to a different neighborhood to live with my aunt. I never saw Elias Thorne again. That meant there was no release form. I sat back in the library chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. In the world of high-end art, provenance is everything. If there is no model release form for a commercial image, especially one used for profit, the rights are murky. But more importantly, Hunter had lied. He had told his guests I was a criminal. He had defamed me, and here, in black and white, was the artist's own testimony that I was a hero. I took a picture of the page with my phone. I requested a certified copy of the book from the librarian. I walked out of the library feeling lighter than I had in years. Hunter thought he had buried me. Instead, he had just handed me a shovel. I drove home to the south side. My house is a small brick bungalow that has seen better days. The porch sags a little, and the paint is peeling, but it is paid for. It is mine. When I pulled up to the curb, I saw a silver Porsche parked in front of my driveway. It looked like a spaceship that had crash-landed in the ghetto. Hunter was standing on my porch. He was wearing a cashmere coat and checking his watch. He looked out of place like a diamond in a coal mine. I parked my car and walked up the path. I didn't hurry. "You are late," Hunter said, not even looking up from his phone until I was 5 feet away. "I have been waiting for 10 minutes. "This is private property, Hunter," I said, unlocking my front door. "Get off my porch." Hunter laughed. He pushed past me into the house before I could stop him. He looked around my small living room, curling his lip at the old floral sofa and the pictures of Zoe on the mantel. "It smells like cabbage and poverty in here," he said. I left the door open. I wanted the cold air to come in. I wanted him to feel the chill. "What do you want?" I asked. "You already took my job. Are you here to take my television too?" Hunter reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a check. He placed it on the coffee table. "I am here to be generous," he said. "I know I got you fired. It was necessary. You were becoming a distraction to Zoe. But I am not a monster." I looked at the check. It was for $5,000. "That is enough to rent a decent apartment for a few months," Hunter said. "Maybe buy some new clothes. In exchange, you sign the house over to me today. I have the notary waiting in the car. We bulldoze this dump next week and you disappear. You go to Florida, you go to hell. I don't care. Just get out of our lives." I looked at the check. $5,000. It was an insult. It wouldn't even cover the property taxes on the land he wanted to steal. I picked up the check. Hunter smiled. He thought everyone had a price. He thought hunger would make me obedient. I walked over to the fireplace. I didn't have a fire going, but I had a lighter in my pocket. I flicked it on. The small flame danced in the gloom of the room. "You think this is about money?" I asked, holding the check over the flame. Hunter's smile faltered. "What are you doing?" "That is $5,000, you idiot. You read the market wrong, Hunter," I said. I watched the corner of the check turn brown, then catch fire. The flame ate the paper, curling the edges, turning the zeros into ash. "I am not for sale," I said. "And neither is this house. This house is where my mother died. This house is where my daughter learned to walk. You can take my job. You can lie about my past. But you will never, ever take my home." I dropped the burning check onto the hearth. We both watched it turn into a black, twisted cinder. Hunter's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He stepped toward me, his hands balled into fists. "You stupid old man," he hissed. "You have no idea what is coming. I will bury you in legal fees. I will have the city inspect every pipe and wire in this shack. I will make you wish you had taken that money." "Get out," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. "Or I will call the police and tell them a strange man is trespassing. And in this neighborhood, the cops don't ask questions first." Hunter glared at me. He adjusted his coat. "This isn't over," he spat. "No," I said, watching him storm out the door. "It isn't." I watched his Porsche speed away, swerving around a pothole. He thought he was driving away from a defeated enemy. He didn't know he had just ignited the fuse. I looked at the ash in the fireplace. Then I looked at the picture of the diary page on my phone. I picked up the landline. I called Levi. I found the diary, I said. And Levi. He came to my house. He offered me money. Did you take it? Levi asked. I burned it, I said. Good, Levi chuckled. Now let me tell you about the plan. We are not just going to sue him, Cornelius. We are going to set a trap. And he is going to walk right into it. Before I tell you about the trap, I want to know, have you ever had a boss fire you for personal reasons? Did you fight back? Tell me in the comments below. And if you are rooting for justice, hit that like button. We are just getting started. It was raining again. The kind of cold, gray Chicago rain that seeps into your bones and makes your joints ache. I was sitting in my kitchen staring at the empty spot on the wall where a picture of Zoe and me used to hang. I had taken it down to dust it, but I hadn't put it back up. It felt dishonest to look at her smiling face, the face of a 7-year-old girl missing her 2 front teeth, while the real Zoe, the 28-year-old stranger, was out there planning to destroy my home. The smell of the burnt check was still lingering in the air, a faint scent of ash and victory. But victory is lonely. Then I heard a car door slam. Not the heavy thud of a Porsche this time, but the sharp click of a Mercedes. I looked out the window. It was Zoe. She didn't knock. She had a key I had given her when she was 10 years old, so she would never be locked out. The door swung open and she marched in. She was wearing a beige trench coat that was belted tight at the waist, and her boots were clean, untouched by the mud of my front yard. She brought the cold air in with her. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She stood in the middle of the linoleum floor, her hands thrust deep into her pockets, and looked at me with eyes that were hard as flint. "Hunter told me what you did," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of warmth. I stayed seated at the table, my hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee. I didn't ask what version of the story Hunter had told her. I knew men like him didn't tell stories. They spun narratives. "He came to my house, Zoe," I said calmly. "He offered me $5,000 to erase 50 years of my life. He insulted your grandmother's memory." Zoe let out a sharp, exasperated sigh. She paced across the small kitchen, her heels clicking on the floorboards that I had installed with my own hands. "He was trying to help you, Dad," she snapped, spinning around to face me. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? My fiancé, a man who runs a multi-million-dollar empire, has to drive down to the South Side to beg my father to accept charity. And you burn it. You literally burned money. Who does that?" I looked at her. I looked for the little girl who used to cry when she saw a stray cat. I couldn't find her. "Charity," I asked, my voice rising just a little. "Since when is eviction called charity? Since when is buying silence called help? He wants this land, Zoe. He doesn't care about me. He wants to build a parking lot." Zoe threw her hands up. "So what if he does? This neighborhood is dying, Dad. Look around you. Half the houses on the block are boarded up. You are holding onto a rotting corpse of a house because of what? Sentimentality. Pride. It is selfish. Selfish." The word hung in the air between us. I stood up slowly. My knees popped, a reminder of the years I spent carrying stretchers up and down stairs. "I worked double shifts for 20 years to pay for this house," I said, stepping toward her. "I missed your school plays because I was working overtime to pay for your violin lessons. I wore the same coat for a decade so you could have new clothes every semester. And you call me selfish?" Zoe didn't back down. She stepped closer, her face flushed with anger. "Yes, I do," she hissed, "because you are jealous." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, confused. Jealous. "You can't stand it," she continued, her words coming faster now, pouring out like venom. "You can't stand that Hunter is successful. You can't stand that he has money, power, and respect, things you never had. You spent your whole life being a servant dad, a driver, a blue-collar worker, and now your daughter is marrying a man who owns the city, and it kills you. You want to bring him down because it makes you feel big." I stared at her. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from anger anymore, but from grief. She truly believed this. She had looked at my sacrifice and seen failure. She had looked at my integrity and seen bitterness. "Is that what you think?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You think I am jealous of a man who mocks the poor? You think I am jealous of a thief?" "He is not a thief," Zoe screamed. She grabbed her purse and pulled out her phone, waving it at me. He is a visionary. He deals in high-end art. He supports museums. You are just bitter because you are small. You have always been small. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It was the realization that I had failed. Not as a worker, but as a father. I had protected her so much from the harshness of the world that she had lost the ability to distinguish between gold and glitter. I am not small, I said, my voice hardening. And I can prove it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the photo gallery and found the picture of Elias Thorne's diary page. The proof. The smoking gun. Look at this, I said, holding the phone out to her. Zoe looked away. She refused to even glance at the screen. I don't want to see your conspiracy theories, she said, turning her head. It is not a theory, I said, shoving the phone into her line of sight. It is a diary entry from the artist. Elias Thorne. Read it, Zoe. He writes about me. He writes about the painting. He writes that he never got a release form. Zoe slapped my hand away. The phone clattered onto the table. Stop it, she yelled. Just stop it. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but they were tears of frustration, not sadness. Do you know how crazy you sound? She asked, her voice trembling. You think a world-famous artist wrote about you. You think you are the subject of a $20 million masterpiece. Dad, look at yourself. You are a retired EMT. You live in a crumbling house. You are nobody. She took a breath, composing herself. Hunter told me about your obsession, she said, her voice dropping to a patronizing tone. He said it is a common symptom of dementia. Delusions of grandeur. You see a black man in a painting and your mind invents a story to make you feel important. My mouth fell open. Hunter hadn't just stolen my image. He was gaslighting my own daughter into thinking I was losing my mind. I am not senile, I said, gripping the edge of the table. I was there. It was 1974. I needed money for Grandma's insulin. Stop lying, Zoe shouted. Grandma died of a stroke. She didn't need insulin. She stopped. Silence filled the kitchen. I looked at her. I had never told her. I had shielded her from the ugly details of our poverty. I had never told her that her grandmother had diabetes and that we often had to choose between food and medicine. I had never told her that the stroke was caused by months of rationing medication. You don't know everything, I said quietly. There are things I did to keep this family afloat that you have no idea about. Wearing that dress was one of them. Zoe shook her head, backing away toward the door. She looked at me with pity now. Deep, profound pity. You are sick, Dad, she said, and you are ruining my life. She put her hand on the doorknob. I came here to give you a chance, she said, not looking at me. Hunter is willing to forgive you. He is willing to let you come to the wedding. He is even willing to pay for a suit since you clearly can't afford one. I didn't answer. But there is a condition, she said. She turned to face me one last time. You have to apologize, she said. You have to write a formal letter of apology to Hunter for your behavior at the dinner and for the arson threat. And you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement stating that you have no claim to the artwork and that your previous statements were the result of confusion. I stood there feeling the weight of the ultimatum. Apologize to the man who insulted me. Sign away my truth. Admit to being crazy, all for the privilege of watching my daughter marry a monster. And if I don't, I asked. Zoe's face hardened into a mask of stone. Then you are not my father anymore, she said. You will not be at the wedding. You will not see your future grandchildren. You will die in this house alone, and I won't be here to bury you. The words hung there brutal and final. She had weaponized her presence in my life. She was holding our relationship hostage. I looked at her. I loved her more than breath itself. But I knew that if I signed that paper, if I bowed down to Hunter, I wouldn't be saving our relationship. I would be validating her delusion. I would be letting her marry a man who would eventually crush her, just like he was trying to crush me. I picked up my phone from the table. I looked at the dark screen. I love you, Zoe, I said. I love you enough to tell you the truth, even if you hate me for it. I will not apologize. And I will not sign. Zoe's lip curled. Fine, she spat. Then goodbye, Cornelius. She didn't call me Dad. She used my first name. It was the ultimate act of severance. She opened the door and walked out into the rain. I watched her get into her Mercedes. I watched her drive away, taking my heart with her. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The silence was deafening. I was alone, no job, no daughter, no money. But as I looked down at my phone at the blurry image of the diary page, I felt something else stirring in my chest. It wasn't despair, it was resolve. Zoe thought she had broken me. Hunter thought he had won. But they didn't understand something about fire. You can use it to burn a bridge, yes. But you can also use it to forge steel. They wanted a fight. They wanted to strip me naked and leave me in the cold. Well, I had been naked before. I had worn a dress in front of strangers to save my mother. I could handle a little cold. I dialed Levi's number. "She is gone," I said. "She chose him. I am sorry." Cornelius, Levi said gently. "Don't be," I said. My voice was hard as iron. Now I have nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man on earth. Get the papers ready, Levi. We are going to that wedding, and we are not going as guests. Before I tell you how we prepared for the wedding crash of the century, I have a question. Has a family member ever cut you off because you refused to lie for them? How did you handle the pain? Tell me in the comments below. And if you are ready to see Hunter Caldwell get what he deserves, hit that like button. The storm is coming. The first night I slept in my car, the temperature in Chicago dropped to 12 degrees. I parked my old sedan under the concrete overpass of the Dan Ryan Expressway, trying to find shelter from the wind that whipped off the lake like a lash. I had a house. I had a deed with my name on it. But Hunter Caldwell was a man of his word. 2 hours after Zoe drove away, a city inspector arrived at my door with a police escort. They claimed they had received an anonymous tip about a gas leak and faulty wiring. They didn't even turn on a meter. They just slapped a bright orange condemned sticker on my front door and told me I had 30 minutes to vacate the premises for my own safety. My own safety. That was the joke. They were kicking a 70-year-old man out into the freezing night to protect him. I knew better. I saw the inspector text someone as he walked back to his truck. I knew who was on the other end of that phone. Hunter had weaponized the city bureaucracy against me. He couldn't buy the house, so he made it unlivable. He wanted to break me. He wanted me to crawl back to him, freezing and desperate, begging for that check. But as I curled up in the back seat of my car, wrapped in 2 wool blankets that smelled of mothballs, I didn't feel like begging. I watched my breath cloud the windows, turning into ice on the glass. Every time I shivered, I thought of Zoe sleeping in her high-rise apartment surrounded by warmth that was paid for with lies. I thought of the painting hanging above her fireplace. The man in the dress. He looked cold too, but he looked strong. And lying there with the roar of trucks passing overhead, I realized that comfort is a trap. Comfort makes you soft. The cold makes you hard. And I needed to be harder than diamond if I was going to survive this. I didn't sleep. I spent the night planning. When the sun finally rose gray and weak, I started the car. The engine groaned, protesting the cold, but it turned over. I drove to the west side to a neighborhood that even the police tried to avoid. I pulled up in front of a shop with barred windows and a faded sign that read, "Goldblatt's Pawn and Loan." The bell chimed as I pushed the door open. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of old electronics. Behind the counter, surrounded by acoustic guitars and power drills, sat a man who looked like he had been carved out of driftwood. Levi Goldblatt was 75 years old. He wore a yarmulke and a cardigan that had seen better days. 20 years ago, he was the most feared civil rights attorney in Illinois. Then he went after a pharmaceutical giant and they destroyed him. They planted evidence, ruined his reputation, and got him disbarred. Now he ran a pawn shop. But I knew that inside that fragile old body was a mind that still worked like a razor blade. Cornelius, Levi said, not looking up from the watch he was repairing with a tiny screwdriver. "You look like hell." "I feel like hell, Levi," I said, leaning against the counter. "But I found something." I pulled out my phone and showed him the picture of the diary page. Levi adjusted his thick glasses. He squinted at the screen. He read it once, then he read it again. He put down the screwdriver. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice low. "The library," I said. "It is from Elias Thorne's personal journals." Levi looked at me. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "Do you know what this is, Cornelius?" he whispered. "This is not just a diary entry. This is a confession." He came out from behind the counter, moving with a surprising energy. He cleared a stack of old VCRs off a table and motioned for me to sit. "Listen to me," Levi said. "In the United States, we have something called the right of publicity. It means that a person has the right to control the commercial use of their identity. Usually artists get around this with a model release form. It is a contract where you sign away your rights for a fee. I never signed anything I said. He paid me $50 cash. Exactly, Levi said, tapping the phone screen. And here the artist admits it. I must get the release form signed when he comes back. That means the contract never existed. Without that paper, Elias Thorne, and by extension anyone who buys his work, does not have the unrestricted right to use your image for commercial gain. But Hunter says he owns the physical painting, I argued. He bought it. He owns the canvas and the paint, Levi corrected. He owns the object, but he does not own the right to display it publicly for profit, or to use it to promote his brand, or to sell it to a museum without clearing the rights. And most importantly, he definitely does not have the right to defame you. Defame me, I asked. Levi's eyes narrowed. You told me he renamed it. The Clown in a Dress. You told me he tells people you were a convict. That is defamation per se. He is damaging your reputation to increase the shock value and the price of the art. He is monetizing a lie about your life. Levi stood up and began pacing the small shop, his hands behind his back. But we have a problem, Cornelius, he said. Hunter is rich. If we sue him now, he will bury us in motions. He will claim the diary is fake. He will claim you are a public figure. He will drag this out for 10 years until we are both dead. The law is a tool, but for men like Hunter it is a weapon. We cannot fight him in a courtroom. Not yet. So what do we do? I asked. I am living in my car, Levi. I don't have 10 years. Levi stopped pacing. He looked at a row of pawned wedding rings in the display case. We need to catch him in a fraud, he said. A criminal fraud. Something the FBI cares about. Something that carries prison time, not just a fine. Levi went to his computer. It was an old desktop tower humming loudly in the corner. He started typing furiously. I still have friends, Cornelius, Levi said. Or rather, I have people who owe me favors. People who track high-value asset movements. If Hunter bought that painting for $20 million, he didn't do it with cash. He leveraged it. And if he leveraged it, he needs to flip it fast to pay back the loan. He clicked a few keys. A black screen with green text appeared. It looked like something from a movie, but I knew Levi used to defend hackers. Here it is. Levi breathed. He pointed to the screen. There was a listing on a private encrypted auction site called the Obsidian Ledger. It was a marketplace for billionaires who wanted to move assets without tax scrutiny. Lot 404, The Clown in a Dress. Asking price $30 million USD, buyer confirmed. The Al Said Foundation, Dubai. He is selling it, I said. He is selling it on Saturday, Levi said. The date of the transfer is listed here. Saturday at midnight. My blood ran cold. Saturday. That is the wedding day, I said. Levi nodded grimly. It makes perfect sense. He is using the wedding as a cover. A massive party, lots of security distracting the press. He plans to hand over the provenance documents and complete the digital transfer of ownership right there in the middle of the reception. Once that transaction clears, the painting goes onto a private jet and flies to Dubai. And once it is in Dubai, I asked, it is gone, Levi said. The UAE has different laws. We will never get it back. And Hunter will have $30 million of clean money. He will pay off his loans, tear down your house, and laugh all the way to the bank. I stared at the screen. The ticking clock was loud in my head. We had 3 days. We have to stop the sale, I said. No, Levi said sharply. I looked at him confused. We don't stop the sale, Levi said, turning to look at me with eyes that shone with a terrifying intelligence. We let him do it. What I asked. Cornelius, listen, Levi hissed. If we stop him now, he just pulls the listing. He claims it was a misunderstanding. He walks away. But if he sells it, if he accepts $30 million for an artwork that he knows has a clouded title, that is wire fraud. That is international grand larceny. And if he uses the painting as collateral for a bank loan while knowing the provenance is fake, that is bank fraud. Levi leaned in close. We need him to sign the papers. We need him to take the money. We need him to stand up in front of the world and claim he owns it. And at that exact moment, we need to prove he is lying. I understood. It was a trap baited with his own greed. But how do we get in? I asked. The wedding is a fortress, private security, guest list only, and Zoe, she uninvited me. Levi smiled. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was a pin, a small golden pin in the shape of a caduceus. The medical symbol. You are not going as a guest, Cornelius Levi said. And you are not going as a father. He closed the box and tossed it to me. I have a contact in the catering company, Levi said. They are short-staffed for the wedding. They need waiters. But more importantly, I have a contact in the art transport team, the team that is supposed to crate the painting after the reception. He looked at me. Can you still lift heavy objects, Cornelius? I thought about the years of lifting stretchers. I thought about the painting of me carrying the weight of the world. I can lift anything, I said. Good, Levi said. Because we are going to smuggle you in. But once you are inside, you have to do the hardest thing of all. You have to watch them. You have to watch him humiliate you. You have to watch your daughter marry him. You have to stay silent until the trap snaps shut. Can you do that? I thought about the cold nights in the car. I thought about the check burning in the fireplace. I thought about the look in Zoe's eyes when she called me by my first name. I will be a ghost, I said, until it is time to be the judge. Levi nodded. Then let's get to work, he said. We need to forge some papers of our own. We need to create a provenance document that is so real, so perfect, that when Hunter sees it, he will question his own sanity. And we need to find the dress. The dress I asked. The wedding dress, Levi said. The one from the painting. If we want to make a statement, Cornelius, we don't just use words, we use theater. If he wants a clown in a dress, let's give him one. But this clown is going to bring down the house. I looked at the old man. We were two discards. A homeless ambulance driver and a disbarred lawyer. We were going up against a billionaire. It was impossible. It was insane. And it was the only reason to keep living. I will find a dress, I said. Levi laughed. And I will find the truth. As I walked out of the pawn shop, the wind hit me again. But this time I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of the battle to come. Hunter Caldwell had started a fire to burn me out. He didn't know that I was walking back into the flames, and I was bringing gasoline. The plan Levi and I concocted required me to do the one thing I swore I would never do again. I had to beg. The next morning I put on my most worn-out pair of trousers and a jacket with a frayed collar. I drove to the sleek, glass-fronted art gallery in the River North district that Hunter used as his headquarters. The sign above the door read, Caldwell Fine Arts, in minimalist steel letters. Inside I could see people moving around preparing for the private viewing before the wedding. I took a deep breath, swallowed the bile rising in my throat, and pushed open the door. Hunter was standing in the center of the room directing two men who were adjusting the lighting on my portrait. When he saw me, he didn't look angry about the burnt check anymore. He looked amused. He held up a hand to stop his assistants and walked over to me, his Italian leather shoes clicking on the polished concrete floor. Well, look who decided to crawl out of the ashes, Hunter said, a smirk playing on his lips. I thought you were going to burn the world down, Cornelius. Did you run out of matches? I lowered my head. I made my shoulders slump. I had practiced this posture in the mirror. It was the posture of a beaten man. I am sorry, Hunter, I said, keeping my voice low and trembling. I was angry. I wasn't thinking straight. The city inspectors kicked me out. I slept in my car. I am cold. I am hungry. And I realized you were right. I can't fight you. Hunter let out a short, sharp laugh. He clapped me on the shoulder hard. It wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was a gesture of ownership. I knew you would come around, he said, looking at his assistants with a grin. Everyone has principles until they freeze their ass off under a bridge. So what do you want? Another check. Because the price has gone down. That offer was a one-time thing. I don't want charity, I said. I want a job. I heard you need extra security for the gallery viewing and the wedding. I know how to stand guard. I was a first responder. I can handle crowds. Please, just let me work. Hunter stared at me. He looked at my gray hair. He looked at my rough hands. And then he looked at the painting behind him, the clown in a dress. A twisted idea formed in his eyes. I could see the wheels turning. He didn't just want me to work for him, he wanted to make me part of the exhibit. You want to be a security guard? Hunter asked. Yes, I said. Hunter smiled. It was the smile of a predator who just found a wounded animal. I think that is a brilliant idea, he said. In fact, it is poetic. The man who inspired the art now guarding the art. It adds a layer of authenticity, don't you think? He snapped his fingers at a young woman holding a clipboard. Get him a uniform, Hunter ordered. But not the standard blazer. Get him the one we use for the event staff, the one with the gold braid. It looks a bit more theatrical. He turned back to me. You are hired, Cornelius. Minimum wage. No benefits. And you have one job. You stand right next to that painting. You don't move. You don't speak to the guests unless spoken to. You just stand there and make sure nobody touches my $20 million asset. Do you understand your position? I understand, I said. Good Hunter sneered. Finally, you know your place. You are not the hero, Cornelius. You are just part of the furniture. Now go get changed. The VIPs arrive in an hour. I walked to the back room to change. My hands were shaking not from fear but from the effort of holding back my rage. I put on the uniform. It was tight in the shoulders and the gold braid looked ridiculous, like something a bellboy would wear in a cheap hotel. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a servant. But inside my pocket I felt the small USB drive Levi had given me. I wasn't a servant. I was a spy. And I was now inside the fortress. The gallery opening that evening was a parade of excess. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and champagne. Waiters circulated with trays of caviar and men in tuxedos laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. I stood at my post 2 feet to the left of the clown in a dress. I stood at attention, my hands clasped behind my back, my eyes fixed on the middle distance. It was a surreal torture. I was standing next to a painting of myself wearing a dress while wearing a uniform that was just another kind of costume. The guests would drift over holding their crystal flutes. They would stare at the painting, tilting their heads, feigning deep emotional connection. "Oh, it is so powerful," a woman in a red silk gown said, clutching her pearls. "You can feel his suffering. You can see how the artist captured the utter humiliation of the human spirit. It makes me want to cry." She dabbed at a dry eye. Then she turned to me. "Guard," she snapped, extending her empty glass. "Take this, and tell the waiter I need a refill." She didn't look at my face. She didn't see that the eyes in the painting were the same eyes staring back at her. To her, the painted suffering was art worthy of tears and millions of dollars. The real suffering standing right in front of her was invisible. It was a service. I took the glass. "Yes, ma'am," I said. Hunter was holding court near the center of the room. He had his arm around Zoe. She looked beautiful, but she looked tired. She was drinking more than usual. Every time she glanced in my direction, she looked away quickly as if looking at me would turn her to stone. Hunter, on the other hand, was loving it. He would bring groups of investors over to the painting, and this Hunter would say, gesturing grandly, is the piece de resistance, the clown. And look at our security guard here. Doesn't he add a certain gritty realism to the display? I like to hire from the community, giving back to the less fortunate. The investors would nod and smile at me benevolently like I was a rescue dog he had adopted. "Good for you, Hunter," one of them said. "It is so important to provide opportunities for the elderly." I stood there. I took it. I let their condescension wash over me. I let them treat me like a prop. Because every minute they spent laughing at me was a minute they weren't watching the office door in the back of the gallery. I was waiting for the signal. Levi had told me that at 9 o'clock the servers would bring out the main hors d'oeuvres, creating a bottleneck near the kitchen. That was my window. At 8:55, Hunter's phone rang. He looked at the screen, frowned, and walked away from the crowd. He headed toward his private office at the back of the gallery. I watched him go. He left the door slightly ajar. He was arrogant. He thought he owned everyone in the room. He didn't think he needed to lock doors. 10 minutes later, Hunter came out looking flushed and angry. He went straight to the bar. He left the office empty. I waited for a large group to crowd around the painting. I stepped back, fading into the shadows. I slipped away from my post. I walked calmly toward the restrooms, but at the last second I ducked into the dark corridor leading to the office. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of the computer screen. Hunter hadn't logged off. He had just been on a call, likely with the buyers in Dubai. I moved quickly. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. If he walked in now, it was over. I would go to jail for corporate espionage, and he would win. I sat down at his desk. The leather chair was still warm from his body. I looked at the screen. It was open to his email client. There was a draft folder open. I clicked on it. There it was. An email addressed to the Al Said Foundation. Subject: finalizing provenance. Thorn Estate. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF. It was a masterpiece of forgery. It was a letter dated 1974, supposedly signed by Elias Thorne, granting full commercial rights to the bearer of the painting. But I knew Elias's signature. I had seen it on the $50 check he gave me. This signature was too neat, too perfect. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was in the edit history. I minimized the window and opened the file properties. There in the metadata was the truth, created yesterday. Author Hunter Caldwell. He had written the letter himself. He was selling a $30 million asset based on a forgery he had typed up 24 hours ago. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. My hands were sweating. I fumbled with the port. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on." I plugged it in. The computer chimed. I dragged the files onto the drive. The progress bar appeared. It was moving agonizingly slow, copying 20%. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Hard, angry footsteps. Copying 50%. Where is the old man? Hunter's voice drifted from the gallery. I told him not to move. Copying 80%. The footsteps got closer. I could hear him breathing. He was coming to the office. Copying 99%. Complete. I yanked the drive out. I didn't have time to close the windows. I dove under the heavy mahogany desk just as the door swung open. Hunter walked in. I held my breath. I pressed myself against the back panel of the desk, praying my knees wouldn't crack. Hunter stood there for a moment. He tapped on the keyboard. "Damn it," he muttered. "I forgot to hit send." He clicked the mouse. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I waited 5 seconds, then 10. I crawled out. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. But I had it. I had the proof. I slipped out of the office and made my way back to the gallery floor. I returned to my post next to the painting just as Hunter walked back into the room with a glass of scotch. He looked at me. He narrowed his eyes. "Where were you?" he asked. "Bathroom, sir," I said. "At my age, sometimes you can't wait." Hunter curled his lip in disgust. "Gross," he said. "Just stand there and look intimidating. Try not to die on my watch." He walked away. I stood up straighter. I felt the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. It wasn't just plastic and metal. It was a grenade, and I had just pulled the pin. The gallery smelled of stale scotch and expensive cigars. It was 2 a.m, and the private viewing had devolved into a bachelor party. The sophisticated art lovers had gone home, leaving only Hunter and his inner circle of wolves. There were 6 of them lounging on the leather benches, their ties undone, their faces flushed with the ugly glow of intoxication. I stood in the corner, a statue in a polyester uniform, watching them spill brandy on floors that cost more than my house. My legs were screaming in pain. I had been standing for 10 hours, but I did not move. I could not move, because for the last hour Hunter Caldwell had been dismantling my life for sport. He was holding a glass of amber liquid, gesturing wildly toward the painting. "The clone in a dress," he shouted, slurring his words slightly. "Look at him, boys, the patron saint of losers." His friends laughed. It was a jagged, cruel sound. Among them was the senator's son I had met at the dinner and a few hedge fund managers who looked like they had never heard the word no in their lives. "You know what is funny?" Hunter continued, pacing in front of the canvas. "The old man actually thinks he matters. He came crawling back here yesterday, begging for a job. Can you believe it? He is standing right over there." He pointed at me. 6 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. They didn't see a man. They saw a prop. They saw a punchline. "Hey, guard," one of them shouted. "Do a little dance for us. Show us that ghetto rhythm." I stared straight ahead. I focused on a small crack in the plaster on the far wall. I locked my knees. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. "He is deaf and dumb." Hunter laughed. "Just like his daughter is blind." The mood in the room shifted. It went from mocking to conspiratorial. Hunter sat down on the bench, leaning in close to his friends. "Speaking of the daughter," the senator's son said, swirling his drink. "Are you really going through with it tomorrow? I mean, she is hot, but she comes with a lot of baggage. Specifically, 70-year-old baggage." Hunter took a long swallow of his drink. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Zoe is an investment." He said, his voice dropping lower, but in the empty gallery it echoed like a gunshot. "You guys don't understand the optics. The market is changing. Investors want diversity. They want inclusion. Marrying a girl from the South Side, a girl who pulled herself up by her bootstraps, it makes me look grounded. It makes the brand look accessible. She is my diversity shield." I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. He wasn't marrying her for love. He wasn't even marrying her for lust. He was marrying her for public relations. But what about the prenup? Another friend asked. Hunter smirked. Ironclad. She gets nothing. Absolutely nothing. And here is the best part. Once the sale of this painting goes through tomorrow, I am moving the assets offshore. The Al Said Foundation is wiring $30 million to a shell company in the Caymans. By the time Zoe realizes she is just a trophy, I will have enough liquid cash to divorce her and buy a senator of my own. He laughed. It was the laugh of a man who believes he is untouchable. So you are really selling the painting? The senator's son asked. I thought there was an issue with the rights. You told us the artist's estate was messy. Hunter waved his hand dismissively. I fixed it. I wrote a little letter from the dead artist, who is going to check. The artist is dead. The model is a senile janitor. And the buyers in Dubai don't ask questions as long as the paperwork looks pretty. It is the perfect crime, gentlemen. And tomorrow we celebrate. I stood there feeling the phone in my pocket burning against my chest. I had been recording for 20 minutes. I had it all. The confession of the forgery. The admission of the wire fraud. The plan to hide assets. And most painful of all, the truth about Zoe. He called her a diversity shield. He called her an investment. I wanted to scream. The rage was a physical thing, a creature clawing at the back of my throat, demanding to be let out. I looked at Hunter's neck. I thought about how easy it would be to cross the room. I knew exactly where to press to stop the flow of blood to the brain. I had learned it to save lives, but I knew it could take them too. It would take 5 seconds, just 5 seconds to wipe that smug grin off his face forever. But then I heard Levi's voice in my head. Don't move until the trap snaps. If I attacked him now, I would be the angry black man assaulting a billionaire. I would go to prison. The recording would be inadmissible. He would spin it. He would win. I had to be the ghost. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. I forced my heart rate to slow down. I breathed in the smell of stale alcohol and breathed out the desire for violence. I was not just a father protecting his daughter anymore. I was a witness for the prosecution. The party wound down an hour later. Hunter was stumbling. His friends half carried him toward the door. Don't forget to lock up guard, Hunter mumbled as he passed me. And don't touch anything, or I will cut off your hands. They left. The heavy glass doors slammed shut. The lock clicked. I was alone. The silence in the gallery was heavy. The lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the floor. I was the only living thing in the room, except for the man in the painting. I turned to look at him. The clown in a dress. I walked over to the canvas. I stood inches away from it. I could see the texture of the paint. I could see the brushstrokes Elias Thorne had made 50 years ago. I remembered that day. I remembered how Elias had looked at me, not with pity, but with awe. He had told me I looked like a king in exile. Hunter had painted over that truth. He had painted over the dignity. I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a small glass vial and a cotton swab. Levi had given it to me. It was a mild solvent strong enough to remove fresh acrylic, but gentle enough not to damage the cured oil paint underneath. Levi suspected that Hunter had altered the painting to hide the dedication. If Elias Thorne had gifted the painting to me, he would have written it on the canvas. Hunter claimed he bought it from a collector in Zurich. That meant he had to erase the evidence of the gift. My hand trembled as I uncorked the vial. The smell of chemical solvent filled the air, sharp and clean. Please be there, I whispered. Please let the truth be there. I looked at the bottom right corner of the painting. Hunter had signed his own name on a plaque below it claiming ownership. But on the canvas itself there was a patch of dark gray paint that looked slightly newer than the rest. It was subtle. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. I dipped the cotton swab into the solvent. I touched it to the dark patch. I rubbed gently, circular motions, like I was cleaning a wound. Gray pigment appeared on the cotton. I threw it away and took a new one. I rubbed again. The gray started to dissolve. Underneath, a flash of white appeared. I held my breath. I worked faster, my heart pounding in my ears. The solvent ate away the lie layer by layer. I saw a letter, T, then an O, 2. I grabbed another swab. My eyes were stinging with tears. I wasn't just removing paint, I was removing 50 years of silence. C-O-R. The letters were painted in bright, defiant white, standing out against the gloomy background. N-E-L. I stopped. I had to wipe my eyes. I couldn't see. I finished the job. There, glowing in the dim light of the gallery, was the message Elias Thorne had left for me half a century ago. To Cornelius, the strongest man I know. 1974. I fell to my knees. I wept. It wasn't a study. It wasn't a rejected piece. It was a gift. He had given it to me. He had named me. He had called me strong. Hunter didn't own this painting. He had stolen it. He had found it likely in some estate sale or dusty attic, saw the dedication, and decided to paint over it. He had decided that a black ambulance driver didn't deserve to own a masterpiece, so he erased me. But truth is like water. You can try to hold it back, you can try to cover it up, but eventually it finds a way through. I stood up. I took a picture of the uncovered signature. I sent it to Levi. Then very carefully I used a quick-drying gray paint marker that Levi had provided to cover it up again. I had to hide it. Just for 24 more hours. Hunter needed to believe he was safe. He needed to stand on that stage tomorrow in front of the cameras and the buyers and claim the painting was his. He needed to feel the victory in his hands. And then, I was going to wipe it away in front of the whole world. I put the vial back in my pocket. I looked at the man in the dress one last time. "Rest easy, my friend," I whispered to the painted figure. "Tomorrow we go to a wedding, and we are going to burn the house down." I walked back to my post. I stood at attention. I waited for the sun to rise on the day of reckoning. The wedding reception was held at the Crystal Gardens on Navy Pier. It was a glass cathedral floating on Lake Michigan, a venue that screamed exclusivity. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of 10,000 white lilies and the expensive perfume of Chicago's elite. I was there, but not as a guest. I was hiding in the catering staging area, standing behind a stack of crates, watching the feed on Levi's tablet. The camera was hidden in a flower arrangement near the head table. I could see everything. I could see the waiters pouring vintage champagne that cost more per bottle than my monthly rent. I could see the senator's son laughing at a joke that wasn't funny, and I could see them. Hunter and Zoe sat at the center of the room like royalty on a dais. Zoe looked breathtaking in a Vera Wang gown that hugged her silhouette, but her face was pale. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes kept darting toward the entrance, scanning the crowd. I knew who she was looking for. She was looking for her father. She had banned me. She had threatened me. But in the deepest part of her heart, she still hoped I would show up in a cheap suit, beg for forgiveness, and validate her choices. She wanted me to witness her ascension to the throne. She didn't know that I was about to burn the throne to the ground. Hunter, on the other hand, was vibrating with energy. He wasn't looking at his new bride. He was looking at his phone. He had it hidden under the tablecloth, the screen glowing against his palm. I knew exactly what he was looking at. He was logged into the encrypted banking app of the Al Said Foundation. He was waiting for the transfer confirmation. $30 million. The price of my dignity. The price of my history. He took a sip of champagne, his eyes manic, tapping his foot impatiently. He looked like a man who had just pulled off the heist of the century and was waiting for the getaway driver. Levi whispered into my earpiece. "The transfer is initiated, Cornelius. The money is moving through the clearinghouse. He has 5 minutes until it hits his offshore account. Once it hits, the crime is complete. Get ready." I put down the tablet. I turned to the garment bag hanging behind me. I unzipped it slowly. Inside was not a tuxedo. It was not a security uniform. It was the dress. Levi had found it in a vintage costume shop in Old Town. It wasn't the exact dress from 1974, but it was close enough to stop your heart. It was an antique wedding gown, the lace yellowed with age, the hem tattered and stained with mud that I had applied myself earlier that morning. It was heavy. It smelled of dust and time. I took off my security uniform. I stood there in my undershirt, a 70-year-old man about to do the most insane thing of his life. I stepped into the dress. The silk felt cold against my skin. I pulled it up over my broad shoulders. It was tight, restricting my movement, just like the poverty that had restricted my life for so long. I didn't button the back. I let it hang open, exposing the scars on my back from the fires I had fought. I didn't put on shoes. I was barefoot. I looked at myself in the reflection of a stainless steel refrigerator. I didn't look like a woman. I didn't look like a drag queen. I looked like a force of nature trapped in a cage of lace. I looked like the painting come to life. I looked terrifying. Levi's voice crackled in my ear again. He is going up to the microphone. It is time. I walked toward the double doors of the ballroom. The security guards I had worked with the night before were standing there. They saw me. Their jaws dropped. One of them reached for his radio, but I just looked at him. I looked him dead in the eye with the intensity of a man who has nothing left to lose. "Don't," I said. "Just don't." He lowered his hand. He stepped aside. He opened the door a crack just enough for me to hear Hunter's voice booming over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hunter announced, his voice smooth and confident. "Thank you for sharing this special day with Zoe and me. But as you know, I am a man who believes in sharing beauty with the world, and tonight I have a gift not just for my wife, but for all of you." I peered through the crack. Hunter was standing on the stage. Behind him was a massive object covered in a red velvet cloth. "This piece," Hunter continued, "came into my possession recently. It is a controversial work. Some say it is ugly, some say it is disturbing. But I say it represents the triumph of the spirit over the grotesque. I present to you the clown in a dress." He grabbed the corner of the velvet cloth. He whipped it off with a flourish. The crowd gasped. The painting was magnificent. Under the spotlights, the figure of the young black man in the wedding dress looked three-dimensional. His pain was raw. His muscles were tense. His eyes seemed to stare directly at Hunter's back, burning a hole through his tuxedo jacket. There was a ripple of applause. It was polite, confused applause. They didn't understand the art, but they understood that they were supposed to clap for money. Hunter beamed. He checked his phone again. He saw the notification. The money was there. He had sold it. He had committed wire fraud in front of 300 witnesses. He raised his glass. To the future, he shouted. And to knowing your worth. That was my cue. I didn't just walk through the doors. I kicked them open. The sound was like a thunderclap. The heavy oak doors slammed against the walls, shaking the room. The music cut out instantly. The applause died. 300 heads turned in unison, and they saw me. I stood in the doorway, framed by the light from the hallway. I was wearing the dress. The lace was torn at the shoulder. My gray hair was wild. My bare feet were planted firmly on the polished floor. I was breathing hard, my chest heaving against the tight bodice. For a moment there was absolute silence. A silence so deep you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. They looked at the painting on the stage. Then they looked at me. Then back at the painting. The resemblance was undeniable. The ghost had walked out of the frame. Zoe stood up. Her chair fell over backward with a loud crash. She covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were wide, filled with a horror that I will never forget. She wasn't horrified by the dress. She was horrified because she recognized the truth. She saw her father stripped of all pretense, wearing his sacrifice-like armor. "Dad," she whispered. The microphone on the head table picked it up. It echoed through the silent room. "Dad." Hunter froze. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor and shattered, spraying golden liquid over his shiny shoes. He stared at me. His face went pale, then red. He looked at the painting, then at me, realizing the nightmare scenario had just walked into his perfect evening. I took a step forward, then another. I walked down the center aisle, the guests parting for me like the Red Sea. I didn't look at them. I didn't look at the senator. I didn't look at the bankers. I kept my eyes fixed on Hunter. I walked with a heavy rhythmic gait. Thump, thump, thump. My bare feet slapped against the marble floor. The sound was primal. It was the sound of labor. It was the sound of every mile I had walked to save a life. A security guard started to move toward me from the side. "Stay back!" I roared. My voice didn't sound like an old man's voice. It sounded like a lion. The guard stopped. I reached the foot of the stage. I looked up at Hunter. He was trembling. He looked small now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a man who knows he has been caught. "You call me a clown," I said. My voice was calm now, deadly calm, amplified by the acoustics of the room so that everyone could hear. "You call me a joke. You sold my face to buy your freedom." I climbed the stairs onto the stage. Hunter backed away, stumbling over his own feet. He bumped into the painting. I stood next to the canvas. I mimicked the pose. I hunched my shoulders. I let my arms hang down. I stared out at the crowd with the exact same expression of sorrow and defiance that Elias Thorne had painted 50 years ago. The effect was electric. People in the front row started crying. They finally saw it. They saw that the painting wasn't a joke. It was a mirror. "You sold a lie, Hunter," I said, turning to face him. "You told them I was a convict. You told them I was a thief. You told them you owned me." I reached into the bodice of the dress. I pulled out a piece of paper. It was the printout of the metadata from his computer. "But you forgot one thing," I said. "You can paint over a signature. You can burn a check, but you cannot erase the truth." I held up the paper. "This is the forgery you wrote last night," I announced. I turned to the crowd. "This man just sold you a stolen painting using a fake provenance letter he typed in his office while I was cleaning his toilet." A gasp went through the room. The representative from the Al-Said Foundation, a man in a dark suit, stood up abruptly, pulling out his phone. Hunter lunged at me. "Shut up," he screamed, his face twisted into a mask of pure hate. "Shut up, you old lunatic." He swung a fist at me. It was a sloppy, desperate punch. I didn't flinch. I caught his fist in my hand. My grip was iron. I had pulled people out of crushed cars. I had carried 300-pound men down flights of stairs. Hunter Caldwell was nothing but a paper tiger. I squeezed his hand. I squeezed until I heard the bones crunch. Hunter screamed. He dropped to his knees. I looked down at him. I looked at Zoe, who was sobbing silently. I looked at the crowd. "I am not a clown," I said. "I am a father who did what he had to do to survive. And this dress," I ripped the lace sleeve off my arm with one violent motion. The sound of tearing fabric was like a gunshot. "This dress is not a costume. It is a uniform, and I have worn it long enough." I shoved Hunter backward. He fell against the easel, knocking the painting over. The canvas hit the floor with a resounding boom. The frame cracked. I looked at the fallen painting. Then I looked at the fallen man. "The trap is sprung, Hunter," I whispered, "and you are the only one caught in it." Suddenly the side doors burst open, but it wasn't catering, it was the FBI. Levi had timed it perfectly. Agents in windbreakers swarmed the room. "Nobody move," an agent shouted. I stood there on the stage, a 70-year-old black man in a torn wedding dress surrounded by the wreckage of a billionaire's life. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I stood tall. For the first time in 50 years, I wasn't carrying the weight of the world. I was watching it crumble. "Get this maniac off the stage immediately." Hunter screamed. His voice cracked, losing all the smooth, cultivated baritone he used to charm investors. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "Security. I pay you to protect me. Drag him out. Throw him in the lake. Do something." Two large guards in black suits stepped forward from the shadows of the wings. They looked at Hunter, then they looked at me. I was standing there in a torn, mud-stained wedding dress, barefoot, with the posture of a general inspecting his troops. I did not flinch. I did not back away. I turned my head slowly to face them. "If you touch me," I said, my voice low and rumbling like a subterranean train, "I will press charges for assault. And unlike your boss, I have the evidence to win." The guards hesitated. They were hired muscle, but they were not stupid. They saw the FBI agents blocking the exits. They saw the cameras flashing. They saw the shift in the room's energy. The power had left Hunter Caldwell, and it had flowed into the old man in the dress. They took a step back, crossing their arms. They were not going to go down for a sinking ship. Hunter looked around, realizing he was alone. His face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. He turned back to this crowd, trying to salvage the illusion. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, this is clearly a mental health episode. My father-in-law is confused. He has a history of delusions. We will get him the help he needs, but for now, please let us return to the celebration." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry, choking sound. "There is no celebration, Hunter," I said. I stepped closer to him. The smell of his fear was stronger than his expensive cologne. It smelled like sour milk. I turned to the audience. I looked at the hundreds of faces staring up at me. I saw confusion. I saw shock. But I also saw curiosity. They wanted to know the truth. "This man told you I was a criminal," I said, pointing to the painting that lay cracked on the floor. "He told you I was a thief. He told you this image was a symbol of shame." I looked down at the canvas. The young man in the painting stared back up at me. "But he lied," I continued. "This is not a painting of a thief. It is a painting of a son. 50 years ago I wore this dress because my mother was dying. I wore it because I needed $50 to buy insulin. I wore it because a man does whatever he has to do to protect his family. That is not shame. That is honor." I looked at Hunter. "You wouldn't understand that. You have never sacrificed anything. You only take." Hunter sneered, regaining a sliver of his arrogance. "Prove it," he spat. "You are just a senile old man telling a sob story. That painting is mine. I have the papers." "Papers?" I asked. "You mean the papers you forged?" I reached into the deep pocket hidden in the folds of the skirt. I pulled out the small glass vial of solvent and a clean white cloth. Hunter's eyes widened. He recognized the bottle. He realized what I was about to do. "Don't you dare," he whispered. That is a $20 million asset. It is not an asset, I said. It is a gift. I knelt down beside the fallen painting. The room went deadly silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I uncorked the vial. The sharp scent of chemicals wafted up, cutting through the smell of lilies and champagne. I poured the solvent onto the cloth. Hunter lunged forward. No. Stop him. He is destroying it. I held up a hand. Back off. I touched the cloth to the bottom right corner of the canvas, right over the dark gray patch of paint that Hunter had applied to hide the truth. I rubbed gently, circular motions, just like I had done in the gallery. But this time I wasn't hiding in the dark. I was under the spotlight. The gray paint began to dissolve. It swirled onto the cloth, black and murky. And underneath the bright white titanium white of Elias Thorne's original brushstrokes began to emerge. The crowd leaned in. The camera from the live feed zoomed in on my hands. The image was projected onto the massive screens on either side of the stage. TOI rubbed again. CORNELIUS. A gasp rippled through the room. It started in the front row and rolled back like a wave. The name was there, undeniable, permanent, to Cornelius, the strongest man I know, 1974. I stood up. I held the cloth stained with the gray paint of Hunter's deception. Elias Thorne didn't sell this painting, I announced. He gave it to me, and this man painted over the artist's final wish so he could sell it to buy a yacht. I looked at the representative from the Al Said Foundation. He was already on his phone looking furious. He pointed at Hunter and made a slashing motion across his throat. The deal was dead. Hunter looked at the screen. He saw the money, the $30 million he thought was his, vanish. The transfer had been flagged. The fraud was exposed. He turned to me. His eyes were wild. He looked like a cornered rat. "You think you have won?" he hissed. "You think this proves anything? So the artist liked you. Big deal. It doesn't prove I committed fraud. It just proves you are a charity case." I shook my head. "I am not done, Hunter." I walked over to the podium. I pulled a small audio cable from my bodice. I plugged my phone directly into the sound system of the Crystal Gardens. "You wanted a speech," I said. "Let's hear yours." I pressed play. Hunter's voice, loud, slurrying, and arrogant, boomed through the speakers. It was the recording from the bachelor party the night before. "Zoe is an investment. You guys don't understand the optics. The market is changing. Investors want diversity. Marrying a girl from the South Side, it makes me look grounded. She is my diversity shield." I looked at Zoe. She was standing near the cake, her hands trembling. Her face was a mask of absolute devastation. She was hearing the man she loved reduce her to a marketing strategy. The recording continued. "Once the sale of this painting goes through tomorrow, I am moving the assets offshore. By the time Zoe realizes she is just a trophy, I will have enough liquid cash to divorce her and buy a senator of my own." The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the painting. It was the silence of a life shattering. Zoe let out a sound that I will never forget. It was a sob that sounded like something tearing. She looked at Hunter. Her eyes, usually so full of adoration, were now filled with a cold, terrifying clarity. Hunter looked at her. He opened his mouth to speak. "Zoe, baby, listen. It was just locker room talk. I was drunk." "Don't," Zoe said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "Don't speak to me." Hunter looked around the room. The senator's son turned his back. The investors were walking away. The world he had built on lies was collapsing in real time, and at the center of the wreckage stood me, the old man, the clown, the failure. Something inside Hunter snapped. The veneer of civilization is thin. For men like Hunter, it is painted on just like the gray patch on the canvas, and when you strip it away, there is nothing underneath but violence. He let out a primal scream. It wasn't a word. It was just noise. Rage. He charged at me. He didn't come at me like a fighter. He came at me like a brawler. He lowered his shoulder and rushed across the stage, aiming to tackle me, to hurt me, to silence the source of his humiliation. I saw him coming. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the sweat flying from his forehead. I saw the veins bulging in his neck. I saw the amateurish way he held his fists. I didn't move. Not yet. I remembered the fire of '92, the roof collapsing. I remembered carrying a 200-pound man through a window while the floor gave way beneath us. I remembered the bar fights in the South Side where I had to defend my crew from drunks with knives. Hunter Caldwell had a gym membership. I had a lifetime of survival. He reached me. He swung a wild right hook aimed at my jaw. I stepped to the left. A simple, efficient pivot. His fist sailed through the empty air where my head had been a fraction of a second before. The momentum carried him forward. He stumbled. I didn't strike him. Not yet. I grabbed his outstretched arm, my fingers thick and calloused from decades of lifting clamped around his wrist like a vice. I pulled him forward using his own momentum against him. I twisted. I stepped in close, my hip locking against his. It was a standard takedown maneuver I had learned in the military police 50 years ago. Muscle memory doesn't age. I swept his legs. Hunter's feet left the ground. For a moment he was suspended in the air, a look of pure confusion on his face. He was flying, but he wasn't ascending. He was falling. I slammed him onto the stage floor. The sound of his body hitting the wood was sickeningly loud. The impact knocked the wind out of him. He gasped, his eyes bulging. I didn't let go of his arm. I twisted it behind his back, applying pressure to the shoulder joint. Not enough to break it permanently, but enough to immobilize him completely. Enough to make him scream. And scream he did. It was a high, thin sound. The sound of a bully who has never felt pain. "Stop!" he shrieked. "You are breaking it." I leaned down. My face was inches from his ear. I was breathing hard, but I was in total control. "I am not breaking it, Hunter," I whispered. "I am adjusting it." I looked up. The FBI agents were rushing the stage now, guns drawn, but they didn't aim at me. They aimed at the man on the floor. I released his arm. I stood up. I smoothed the skirt of the wedding dress. I adjusted the torn lace. Hunter curled into a fetal position, clutching his shoulder, sobbing. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He looked like the clown he had tried to make me. I looked at the crowd one last time. "The show is over," I said. My voice was tired now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, aching weariness. I walked to the edge of the stage. I sat down on the edge, my legs dangling, the dress pooling around me like a cloud. I watched as the agents pulled Hunter to his feet. I watched as they cuffed his hands behind his back. I watched as they read him his rights. Wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery, attempted assault. As they dragged him past me, he looked up. His eyes were red. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. "You are nothing," he spat. "You are just a garbage man." I looked at him. I smiled. It was a sad smile. "I may be a garbage man, Hunter," I said softly, "but today I took out the trash." The agents hauled him away. The heavy doors closed behind him. I sat there on the stage alone again. The room was buzzing with noise now. People were shouting, calling their lawyers, taking photos. But I didn't hear them. I looked down at the floor. Zoe was walking toward the stage. She was holding her shoes in her hand. Her makeup was ruined. Her expensive dress was wrinkled. She stopped in front of me. She looked up. She looked at the dress I was wearing. She looked at the scars on my arms. She looked at the painting that was now leaning against the podium, the name Cornelius shining bright white in the center. She didn't say anything. She just reached out and touched the hem of the dirty, torn wedding dress. She rubbed the fabric between her fingers. Then she looked at me, and for the first time in years, the steel shutter behind her eyes was gone. "Dad," she whispered. I looked at her. I didn't smile. I didn't open my arms. I just looked at her with the weary love of a father who has had to break his child's heart to save her soul. "Hello, Zoe," I said. The silence between us was the loudest thing in the room. We had won the war. Hunter was gone. The truth was out. But as I looked at my daughter's devastated face, I knew that the hardest part wasn't fighting the villain. The hardest part was going to be rebuilding the ruins he left behind. The chaos that followed was not the chaotic noise of a riot, but the precise surgical strike of justice. The side doors of the Crystal Gardens did not just open, they were breached. A dozen agents in navy blue windbreakers with the bright yellow letters FBI emblazoned on their backs swarmed into the ballroom. They moved with a fluidity that made the private security guards look like children playing dress-up. I sat on the edge of the stage, my chest heaving, watching the empire of Hunter Caldwell disintegrate in real time. Levi had timed it perfectly. He knew that the moment the wire transfer was attempted, the federal trap would snap shut. Hunter was still on his knees, clutching his shoulder, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked at the agents rushing toward him, and for the first time in his life he realized that money could not build a wall high enough to keep out the consequences of his own greed. Get your hands off me, Hunter screamed as two agents hauled him to his feet. Do you know who I am? I am Hunter Caldwell. I own this city. I will have your badges. I will sue the entire department. The lead agent, a woman with eyes like flint, didn't even blink. She spun Hunter around and slammed him against the wooden podium. The sound of metal on bone echoed through the silent room as she pulled his arms behind his back. Hunter Caldwell, she said, her voice cutting through his hysteria. You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and the interstate transportation of forged goods. You have the right to remain silent. I advise you to use it, I said from my perch on the stage. Hunter twisted his head to look at me. His eyes were bulging. This is a setup, he shrieked. That old man is crazy. He planted evidence. He is the criminal here. Arrest him. The agent ignored him. She tightened the cuffs. The metallic click was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lock closing on a monster. But the law was only the first hammer to fall. The second was the money. The representative from the Al Said Foundation, the man in the dark suit who had been ready to pay $30 million for my face, stepped forward. He walked up to the stage, his face calm, but his eyes burning with a cold desert fury. He held up his phone. The screen was flashing red. Mr. Caldwell, the representative said, his voice quiet but deadly. We have just received confirmation from your bank that you attempted to authenticate the transaction using a falsified provenance document. Hunter went pale. Wait. No, it was a mistake. My assistant sent the wrong file. The representative shook his head. There is no mistake, he said. You attempted to defraud the foundation. You attempted to sell stolen property to my employers. In my country, we have very strict laws about theft. But here I will settle for the American way. He tapped his phone screen. Our legal team has just filed an emergency injunction. We are suing you for breach of contract and attempted grand larceny. We are also freezing the escrow account. You will not see a dime of that money. In fact, we are countersuing for damages to our reputation. By the time we are done with you, Mr. Caldwell, you will not be able to afford a bus ticket, let alone a lawyer. The color drained from Hunter's face completely. He looked at the guests. The senator's son was frantically typing on his phone, likely distancing himself publicly from the scandal. The investors were already leaving heads down, avoiding eye contact. The rats were fleeing the sinking ship. My assets, Hunter stammered. You can't freeze my assets. I have liquidity. I have offshore accounts. The lead FBI agent leaned in close to his ear. We know about the Cayman's account, Hunter, she said. We have been monitoring it for months thanks to a tip from a Mr. Levi Goldblatt. That account was frozen 10 minutes ago. Your credit cards are dead. Your penthouse is being sealed as a crime scene. You are bankrupt. Hunter let out a sound that was half sob, half gag. His knees gave way, and the agents had to hold him up. He looked at the painting of me on the floor. He looked at me in the dress. He realized that the man he had called a clown had just checkmated him in front of the entire world. Help me, he whined, looking around desperately. Someone help me! His eyes landed on Zoe. She was standing at the foot of the stairs. She hadn't moved since the recording played. She looked like a statue carved out of ice. Her wedding dress was perfect, but her face was a ruin. The mascara was running down her cheeks in black rivers. Zoe Hunter pleaded, Baby, call my father's lawyer. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them I am a good man. You know I am a good man. I watched my daughter. I held my breath. This was the moment. The law could take his money. The Dubai investors could take his reputation. But only Zoe could take his power. Zoe slowly walked up the stairs onto the stage. Her heels clicked on the wood. She stopped 3 feet away from him. She looked at the handcuffs. She looked at his sweating, terrified face. A good man, she repeated. Her voice was hollow. Yes, Hunter said, nodding frantically. I did this for us, Zoe. I did it for our future. I wanted to give you the world. You heard the recording wrong. I was just talking big for the boys. You know I love you. You are my queen. Your queen, Zoe asked, or your shield. Hunter froze. I heard you, she said. I heard every word. You didn't marry me because you loved me. You married me because I was black. You married me because I was poor. You married me because you thought I would be grateful just to be in the same room as you. No, Hunter stammered. That is not true. You called me an investment, Zoe said, her voice rising, cracking with pain. You planned to divorce me and leave me with nothing. You made me turn against my own father. You made me hate the man who raised me just so I could fit into your twisted little world. She took a step closer. I stood by you when you mocked him, she said. I stood by you when you stole his house. I let you turn me into a monster. And for what? For a lie. For a bank account. Zoe, please, Hunter begged. I can fix this. We can fix this. Zoe looked down at her left hand. The diamond ring on her finger glittered under the stage lights. It was a massive rock, cold and heavy. She grabbed the ring with her right hand. She pulled. It was tight, but she yanked it off, scratching her skin. She held the ring up. You want to fix this? She asked. She threw the ring. It hit Hunter in the chest, bounced off, and skittered across the floor until it stopped at my bare feet. I am not your investment, Zoe screamed. And I am certainly not your shield. Hunter looked at the ring on the floor. Then he looked at Zoe. A flash of pure, ugly anger crossed his face. The mask dropped completely. You stupid girl, he spat. You are nothing without me. You are just a ghetto girl playing dress up. I made you. I bought those clothes. I bought that face. Without me, you are just like your father. Trash. The word hung in the air. Trash. Zoe didn't scream. She didn't cry. She moved. She stepped forward and swung her hand. It wasn't a slap, it was a strike. It was all the rage, all the betrayal, all the years of feeling inadequate condensed into one motion. Her palm connected with Hunter's cheek with a sound like a pistol shot. It was so hard that Hunter's head snapped back. A trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. The room gasped. Zoe stood there, her hands still raised her chest, heaving. She looked wild. She looked dangerous. She looked exactly like me. Don't you ever speak to me again, she hissed. She turned to the FBI agents. Get him out of my sight, she said, before I kill him. The agents nodded. They dragged Hunter away. He was kicking and screaming, cursing Zoe, cursing me, cursing the world, but nobody was listening. He was just noise now. He was a bad memory being flushed away. I watched him disappear through the doors. Then I looked at Zoe. She was standing alone in the center of the stage. She was trembling. The adrenaline was fading and the reality was crashing in. She was a bride without a groom, a daughter who had betrayed her father, a woman who had just realized her entire life was a lie. She looked at me. I was still sitting on the edge of the stage, the old man in the dress. She didn't come to me. She couldn't. The shame was too great. She covered her face with her hands and collapsed to her knees, sobbing. It was a deep, guttural sound of mourning. She wasn't mourning Hunter. She was mourning the girl she used to be. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to hold her. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. She needed to feel this. She needed to burn the poison out of her system with tears. Levi walked up to the stage. He was wearing a tuxedo he must have rented, but he looked like the finest lawyer in Chicago. He handed me a towel to wipe the makeup and sweat from my face. It is done, Cornelius Levi said softly. He is gone. The house is safe. The painting is yours. I took the towel. I wiped my face. I looked at the painting of the clown in a dress. It was battered. The frame was cracked. But the name Cornelius was still shining there. It is not over, Levi, I said, looking at my weeping daughter. The war is won, but now I have to save the casualty. I stood up. My knees ached. I walked over to the ring that Zoe had thrown. I picked it up. It was heavy. It felt like cold ice. I walked over to Zoe. I stood over her. Zoe, I said. She didn't look up. She just shook her head, sobbing into her hands. Go away, she choked out. Please, just go away. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't go away. I reached down and took her hand. I pulled her up. She resisted at first, but I was stronger. I pulled her to her feet until she was looking me in the eye. Look at me, I said. She opened her eyes. They were red and swollen. You are not trash, I said firmly. And you are not a victim. You are a Banks. And in this family, we don't stay on our knees. I put the diamond ring in her hand. Sell it, I said. Pay your debts. And then come home. I turned and walked away. I walked off the stage. I walked down the aisle past the staring guests, past the cameras. I walked out of the Crystal Gardens and into the cool night air of Chicago. I was wearing a torn wedding dress. I was barefoot. I had no car. I had no job. But as I looked at the city skyline, I felt richer than any man in that building. I had my name back. I had my dignity. And I knew deep down that I would get my daughter back too. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers had faded into the distance, leaving only the cold yellow glow of the street lamps reflecting off the dark waters of Lake Michigan. I sat on a concrete bench outside the venue, the adrenaline finally draining from my body, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. My feet were bare and cold against the pavement. The wedding dress was torn and stained, a ridiculous garment for a 70-year-old man to be wearing on a Saturday night. But I felt more dignified in it than I ever had in a uniform that Hunter Caldwell had forced me to wear. I wasn't alone. A few feet away, sitting on the curb with her expensive Vera Wang gown puddling in the dirty gutter, was Zoe. She had stopped crying. Now she was just shaking. It was a rhythmic, uncontrollable tremor that rattled her bones. She was holding her phone, scrolling through bank accounts, emails, and notifications, her face illuminated by the harsh white light of the screen. Every swipe brought a fresh wave of panic to her eyes. She looked up at me. Her mascara was smeared across her cheeks like war paint that had run in the rain. She looked young again, not the sophisticated socialite she had tried so hard to become, but the terrified little girl who used to wake up from nightmares and run to my bed. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was cracked and dry. I turned to look at her. I didn't speak. I waited. "It is gone," she said. "Everything. The penthouse. The cars. The accounts." She held up the phone, her hand trembling so violently she almost dropped it. "I checked our joint account," she said. "It is empty. He drained it before the wedding. He moved everything to the Caymans, and now the feds have frozen it. But that is not the worst part." She took a ragged breath, the air hitching in her chest. "I signed the papers, Dad. The loans for the gallery expansion, the lease on the Aston Martin, the credit lines for the wedding. He told me it was just a formality. He told me his credit was tied up in investments and he needed a co-signer to keep things moving quickly." She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. "I am liable, Dad. The emails are already coming in. The default notices. I owe nearly $2 million. $2 million. The number hung in the air between us like a guillotine blade. I looked at my daughter. I saw the terror in her eyes. It was the terror of a person who has never known true hunger, suddenly realizing that the banquet table has been overturned. She wasn't afraid of starvation. She was afraid of becoming me. She was afraid of the poverty she had spent her entire adult life running away from. "They are going to come for me," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "They will garnish my wages. They will take my savings. I will be bankrupt by Monday morning. I will lose my job. I will lose everything." She crawled over to the bench. She reached out and grabbed the dirty lace of the wedding dress I was wearing. She clung to it like a lifeline. "But you have the painting," she said, looking up at me with a sudden, desperate hope. I went stiff. I looked down at her hands, gripping the dress. "The painting," she repeated, her words tumbling out faster now. "Levi said it is yours. The FBI confirmed it. The provenance is clear. The Al Said Foundation. Maybe they won't buy it from Hunter, but they might buy it from you. Or a museum. It is worth $20 million, Dad. Even if you sell it for half, even for a quarter." She squeezed my knee. "You can save me," she said. "You can pay off the debts. We can start over. You can buy a new house. I can get a small apartment. We can be a family again. Please, Dad, you have to help me. I am your daughter." I looked at her. I looked at the desperation that had turned her into a stranger. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a bailout. She looked at the painting, the symbol of my sacrifice, the image of my suffering, and she saw an ATM machine. She saw a way to erase her mistakes without feeling the pain of them. I reached down and gently but firmly removed her hands from my knee. "No, Zoe," I said. The word was soft, but it hit her like a physical blow. She recoiled, staring at me as if I had just slapped her. What she whispered. I said no. I repeated. My voice was steady. "I will not sell the painting to pay your debts." But why?" Zoe stammered. Her face twisted in confusion and anger. "You have the money. It is right there. It is just a piece of canvas, Dad. You can't eat a painting. You can't live in a painting. Why would you keep it when you could save my life?" I stood up. My knees popped. I towered over her, the street lamp casting my shadow long across the pavement. "I saved your life tonight, Zoe," I said. "I stopped you from marrying a man who would have used you as a shield and then discarded you like trash. I stopped you from living a lie for the rest of your life. That is saving your life." I pointed to the phone in her hand. "But that is not a life. That is a lifestyle. And it is a lifestyle you bought with currency you didn't have. Dad, please. Zoe cried, tears streaming down her face again. You don't understand. I will be ruined. I will have to file for bankruptcy. I will have nothing. I will be just like... She stopped. She caught herself. Just like who I asked. She looked down at the pavement, ashamed. Just like you, she whispered. I nodded slowly. The truth was finally out. Yes, I said. You will be just like me. You will be poor. You will have to work hard. You will have to count every penny at the grocery store. You will have to worry about rent. I knelt down so I was eye level with her. For 30 years, Zoe, you have looked at my life with pity. And lately, with disgust, you looked at my calloused hands and my old car, and you thought I was a failure. You thought poverty was a disease and money was the cure. So you ran to Hunter. You ran to the shiny things. You didn't care that he was cruel. You didn't care that he mocked me. You only cared that he could buy you a way out of being a Banks. I took a deep breath. The night air was cold, but my blood was hot. You wanted the shortcut, I said. You signed those papers because you were greedy. You wanted the penthouse and the status without doing the work. You wanted to skip the struggle. I stood up again, looking out at the dark lake. I wore this dress in 1974 because I had no choice, I said. I carried the weight of this family on my back because there was no one else to do it. I didn't have a rich father to bail me out. I didn't have a safety net. I had a spine. And I used it. I looked back at her. If I pay your debts now, Zoe, I will be robbing you of the most important lesson a human being can learn. I will be teaching you that mistakes don't have consequences. I will be teaching you that there is always a man to come and fix it. First Hunter, now me. I shook my head. I love you too much to let you be weak, I said. I love you too much to let you be a parasite. Zoe stared at me. Her mouth was open. She had never heard me speak like this. She had only known the father who gave her the last piece of chicken, the father who wore old coats so she could have new boots. She didn't know the father who could let her fall so she could learn how to stand up. So you are going to let me drown, she asked, her voice trembling with bitterness. You are going to let the bank take everything. I am going to let you swim, I corrected her. I reached into the pocket of the dress. I pulled out a $20 bill. It was the only money I had on me. It was wrinkled and soft. I handed it to her. Here, I said. She looked at the bill. What is this, she asked. Bus fare, I said. And breakfast. She looked at me with disbelief. You are joking, she said. I am not joking, I said. You have a law degree, Zoe. You are smart. You are healthy. You are young. You have more advantages right now than I ever had in my entire life. I pointed to the city skyline. Go out there and get a job. A real job. Not a trophy wife job. Get a public defender job. Get a waitress job. I don't care. Work. Pay off your debt dollar by dollar. Feel the weight of it. Let it make your muscles strong. But it will take years, she wailed. Then you better start tomorrow morning, I said. I turned away from her. I started walking down the sidewalk, the hem of the wedding dress dragging on the concrete. Dad, wait, Zoe called out. Where are you going? What are you going to do with the painting? I stopped. I didn't turn around. I am going to give it to someone who understands its value, I said. And it is not you. Not yet. I kept walking. I heard her crying behind me, but I didn't stop. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, harder than running into a burning building, harder than burying my mother. Leaving my child sitting on a curb in the middle of the night broke, and broken, went against every instinct I had as a father. But I knew that if I turned back, if I wrote that check, I would lose her forever. She would never respect herself. She would never respect me. She would just be Hunter's victim rescued by her father's luck. I wanted her to be a survivor. And survivors are forged in the fire. I walked for blocks. The city was quiet. A few cars passed, slowing down to look at the crazy old man in the wedding dress. I didn't care. I felt light. I felt clean. I had lost my house. I had lost my job. And in a way, I had lost the version of my daughter that I had tried so hard to protect. But as the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold, I knew I had found something else. I had found the truth. And the truth was, Zoe was going to be okay. Not because I saved her, but because I didn't. The week after the wedding was a blur of lawyers and flashing cameras. The story of the man in the wedding dress had gone viral. It was on every news channel from New York to Tokyo. Suddenly the painting that Hunter Caldwell had mocked as a joke became the most talked about piece of art in the world. My phone, which had been silent for years, wouldn't stop ringing. Private collectors were calling Levi. They were offering insane amounts of money. A tech billionaire from Silicon Valley offered $25 million. A Russian oligarch offered 30. They didn't care about the story. They just wanted the trophy. They wanted to own the scandal. Levi sat across from me in his pawn shop, surrounded by stacks of offer letters. "You could take the highest bid," Cornelius Levi said, peering over his glasses. $30 million. You could buy an island. You could buy the entire block your house sits on. I looked at the offers. They were just numbers on a page. Zeros and commas. "I don't want an island, Levi," I said. "And I don't want my face hanging in another rich man's living room being laughed at over cocktails." I pushed the papers aside. "Call the Museum of African American History," I said. Levi raised an eyebrow. "They can't match these prices, Cornelius. They rely on grants and donations." "I know," I said, "but they won't hide the truth." We met with the museum director the next day. Dr. Alicia Reynolds was a woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She didn't look at the painting as an asset. She looked at it as a testimony. "We can offer $15 million, she said softly. "It is the most we have ever paid for a single acquisition. I know it is half of what the private market is offering." I looked at the painting now resting on an easel in her office. The solvent had been cleaned away properly by restorers. The name Cornelius was bright and clear. "I have one condition," I said. "Anything she asked." "You changed the name on the plaque," I said. "Hunter called it the Clown in a Dress. I want that name gone." Dr. Reynolds smiled. She opened a folder. "We have already prepared the new plaque," she said. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It read, "The Burden of Atlas. Artist Elias Thorne. Subject Cornelius Banks. A Portrait of Sacrifice." I signed the papers. I walked out of that office $15 million richer, but the lightness in my step had nothing to do with the money. It came from knowing that when people looked at that painting now, they wouldn't see a joke. They would see a father. They would see a man who carried the weight of the world so his family wouldn't have to. 1 year has passed since that day. I didn't move to a penthouse. I didn't buy a yacht. I bought my house back from the city. I fixed the roof. I painted the porch. I planted a garden where the weeds used to be. But I didn't stop there. I bought the condemned house next door and the one next to that. I didn't tear them down to build a parking lot. I renovated them. I opened the Banks Community Center. It is a Saturday morning, and the gym is smelling of floor wax and young ambition. I am kneeling on a mat surrounded by 20 teenagers from the neighborhood. They are wearing t-shirts that say First Responders Training Program. I look at them. I see myself in their eyes. I see the hunger. I see the worry about things kids shouldn't have to worry about. Rent, food, safety. All right, listen up, I say, my voice booming off the walls. I don't shout like a drill sergeant. I speak like a grandfather. I press my hands onto the chest of the dummy in front of me. CPR is not about strength, I tell them. It is about rhythm. It is about persistence. You are not just pumping blood. You are telling that heart that it is not allowed to give up. You are fighting death with your bare hands. I demonstrate the compression. 1, 2, 3, 4. The kids watch me. They don't see a millionaire. They don't see a viral sensation. They just see Mr. Banks, the guy who teaches them how to save lives. And that is exactly how I want it. The door opens. A woman walks in. She is wearing a simple gray suit and sensible shoes. She looks tired, but it is a good kind of tired. The tired that comes from honest work. It is Zoe. She is holding 2 coffees. She stands by the door watching me teach. She smiles. It is a small smile, tentative, but real. I finish the class. Good work today, I tell the kids. Remember, the uniform doesn't make you a hero. What you do when nobody is watching makes you a hero. Dismissed. The kids scatter laughing and high-fiving. I walk over to Zoe. She hands me a coffee. Black 2 sugars. Just how I like it. How was court, I ask. She takes a sip of her own cup. It was tough, she says. My client is innocent, but the system is slow. I filed a motion to dismiss. I think we have a chance. Zoe is a public defender now. She drives a used Honda. She lives in a studio apartment in Rogers Park. She is paying off her debt to the creditors month by month. It will take her another 5 years to be free. But she is free in the ways that matter. Hunter Caldwell is currently serving year 1 of a 10-year sentence in federal prison. I don't think about him much. He is just a ghost story I tell the kids to warn them about the dangers of greed. Zoe and I walk out onto the porch of the community center. The sun is shining on the south side. It is not a perfect place. There are still sirens in the distance. There is still struggle. But there is also hope. I pull out my phone. I have a picture saved as my wallpaper. It is a photo of the painting hanging in the main hall of the museum. There is a crowd of people standing in front of it. A father is pointing at the canvas, explaining something to his son. Zoe looks at the screen. "Do you miss it?" she asks. "The money, the fame." I look at her. I look at the center behind me full of kids who have a safe place to go. I look at the daughter standing next to me who finally knows the value of $1 and the value of a soul. I shake my head. "I never wanted to be rich, Zoe," I say. "I just wanted to be enough." She rests her head on my shoulder. "You were always enough, Dad," she says. "I was just too blind to see it." We stand there for a while watching the neighborhood wake up. I think about Elias Thorne. I think about the $50 he paid me. I think about the dress. People used to ask me if I was embarrassed. They asked how a strong black man could let himself be painted in a woman's gown. They didn't understand. The dress wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign that I was willing to do anything, absolutely anything to survive. It was armor. And now I don't need the armor anymore. I have built something that will last longer than canvas and paint. I have built a legacy. I take a deep breath of the cool morning air. I am Cornelius Banks. I am 71 years old, and I have never felt more alive. This is my story. It is a story about how the world tried to paint me as a joke and how I grabbed the brush and painted my own ending. Thank you for listening. This journey taught me that dignity is never determined by what you wear, but by how you stand when the world tries to bring you down. Hunter thought that a man in a dress was a joke because he only saw the fabric, not the sacrifice. He didn't understand that sometimes the things that humiliate us are actually the armor that saves us. I learned that you cannot buy respect with a checkbook, and you cannot build a future on a foundation of shame. True wealth isn't about having a penthouse. It is about having the courage to walk away from one when the price is your soul. My daughter is learning that rock bottom is not the end. It is the solid ground where real character is built. And that my friends is the most valuable masterpiece of all. If this story inspired you to stand tall in your own truth, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about justice, resilience, and the power of the human spirit. I am Cornelius Banks, signing off. See you in the next story.